All right, and we are live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's bonus stream. I think that's the format we're gonna do. We're gonna have the weekly show every Friday night, and then one on some random day during the week. We're gonna try to do these bonus streams where we react to something. Maybe even do gaming streams at some point. I don't know. I have to figure out. I probably have to get a different computer for that, but I feel like that'd be fun. But anyways, guys, welcome to tonight's stream. Tonight we will be reacting to. I didn't watch this whole thing, by the way, yet, but I thought it was a pretty interesting content. It was the conservative versus libertarian debate on the KGB show. By the way, guys, since we are reacting to their content, might as well plug them. If you're not subscribed to the KGB show, great boys, great friends of ours. Be sure to go subscribe. Be sure to go like on that stream and whatnot. But yeah, I don't know. Let's get right into this. I don't know what to expect. I've seen some of this, haven't seen all of it. So yeah, let's do this. Actually, you know what? I will say we probably do want to skip a few minutes in because I think there's a lot of pleasantries and introductions that are, not the most super important. But I don't know. We've done this several times by now, but it's fun content, is it not? Reacting to libertarians, reacting to libertarian talking points. So,
but yeah, Blake, what are your general thoughts on libertarianism?
Oh boy, I get to go first. We should have flipped a coin or something.
No, I like this. This is great.
I am a former libertarian.
Go subscribe.
As are every single paleo conservative or authentic conservative that I've ever met. My dad's a big libertarian guy. I was libertarian throughout a lot of the Trump years.
You want to know something interesting on that point? I think the vast majority of us that have ever been introduced to online politics in some way, we're all former libertarians. We all had our libertarian phase. I will say the exception I've met to this rule very rarely, very, very rarely, but on a small handful of occasions, the exception I've found to these rules specifically tend to be women. But women who were raised, you can tell were just raised in very correct ways. And I've met a handful of them where they don't even really know a whole lot about politics. They have not gone down this whole internet rabbit hole pipeline. Maybe they have to an extent, but not super involved in it. But they were raised in such a correct manner that they naturally have all of the instincts that it took us through reading and research and all these things to find, which is to say, boys, to the boys out there, they do exist. I've met a handful of them. It's very rare, but somewhere in any town, USA, they are lurking in the shadows. Okay, it is true. I've met a few.
Until
it's interesting. It's a very interesting phenomenon too.
When we saw the BLM riot,
because it's a lot of people you wouldn't really expect. You know what I mean? It's a lot of people you wouldn't expect.
And then that sort of snapped me out of it. I realized, wow, yeah, people lack all form of agency whatsoever, and order really is necessary. I'm also a Christian. I was not a Christian when I was a libertarian. I know that you're a Christian. However, I fundamentally believe that libertarianism as an ideology is...
Homeschool girls are mostly traditional. Yeah, that's basically what I was getting at. I think there are some who actually weren't homeschooled, but very small town that have the same instincts. But it's true. It's true. Homeschool girls, they have a reputation of being very weird. Sometimes they are a little weird, but the truth is many of them are raised with very correct instincts. This is real.
Satanic.
This is
true. There are multiple reasons for this. Namely, libertarianism upholds the self before anything else.
True.
It's very highly individualistic, which some could say is a good thing. Aspects of individualism are good, but like all things, they're good in moderation. Libertarianism is very, it's a very...
I was too, actually.
Ideology.
Funny story.
And it upholds consent-based morality above all else, as opposed to Christ's morality. And I also believe that government power is not only allowed in the Bible, but it's also encouraged. Now, I know you didn't prepare notes, but I just prepared a couple of Bible verses that I already knew off the top of my head, but I just had to write them down so that I could remember the exact scripture itself. First of all, God does not agree with the not.
I think I don't want to say it's the horseshoe theory because I don't think it's a perfect example of it. But it's very interesting because when I was first involved in politics, well, like conservative politics. I was like a Tucker Carlson like disciple almost. Like I was super into Tucker. And not like this is also, I think this is like 2018 Tucker. This was back when Tucker was considered controversial to a lot of people. Back when he used to actually get suspended from Fox News. Now they can't touch him because he's so popular and so powerful. But I was big into him. And then I went down my Ben Shapiro phase that introduced me to Ayn Rand and a lot of other like Lolbert nonsense. I never really took the Ayn Rand pill, but that kind of like just train of thinking, train of morality or whatever. And then when I came back in 2020, I came like back to Tucker. It was kind of a funny arc, but anyways.
Progression principle. Okay, and the case here can be found in
So
numbers.
we can get back into this when you guys actually start debating. But if you have no further
Let me change the
thoughts on libertarianism
layout. Hold on.
I think that we should.
I was gonna express.
just let him go.
Yeah.
I was gonna express my
I've
full
got-
take on
okay.
libertarianism.
I've got Bible verses too. So
Okay,
we're
awesome.
good. Okay.
So Numbers 25:17 through 18. Harass the Midianites and attack them, for they harassed
Hold on,
you with
I gotta
their
fix
schemes,
something.
by which they seduced you in the matter of Peor and in the matter of Cosby, the daughter of a leader of the Midian, their sister, who was killed in the day of the plague because of Peor. So basically, what was going on here is one of the Midianites, they sent one of their very attractive daughters to seduce.
You guys can listen to the debate. I have to fix something on the stream really quick.
That's sort of scheming. Some versions of this scripture say that the Midianites are scheming, and some of them also say instead of harass the Midianites, say kill the Midianites. But I'm not going to go that far. But with scheming, I think that this is very important because what the left is doing right now in our country is they are scheming.
I think on this point, I think that the example of Christians always ponder this question. It's kind of a debate within basically every church sector out there, which is like, well, yes, ancient Israel basically was a theocratic monarchy. Not only was it a monarchy based on pretty absolute power, not a very democratic society, but it was also a monarchy in which the religious institutions, right, the rabbi class and whatnot, had enormous power, political power and social power in that society. And so in a lot of Christian circles, there's this debate, well, shouldn't that be the model of government? But then on the other hand, some Christians say, well, look at the New Testament. That's different. We're in a new covenant. That's ancient Israel. Ancient Israel is not the country of today or whatever. And I think that Actually, I'll let this debate play out a little bit before I kind of delve into that take more, because there was something I have watched this far in the debate. There is something I kind of have to say, but I'll kind of let the back and forth go more and then kind of respond to it. I'll let the point make itself.
Becoming total degenerates, and we got to harass them. We've got to attack them. Furthermore, Romans 13. You should submit to governing authority. All government authority is ordained by God. Now, you might say, oh, well, is Biden ordained by God? Yes, he is. And we don't know the reason he's ordained by God. He could just be an agent of chaos to turn America back into the correct direction. We don't know. The only
punishment. He's punishment against America for
worldly authority,
its wickedness, literally,
is when they tell you to sin. So from that, we know that God allows us to legislate.
Like unironically, that's probably the case. Because it's no surprise, right? Like what happens when, our country degrades morally, moves away from God. We get stuck with leaders like like Mr. Brandon. Like it's real. It's true.
Morality.
It's true.
He allows us to have laws. And in the real early Old Testament, it's all about laws. Okay. I mean, people were getting killed. So my justification for capital punishment has always been, if you slay man, you shall be slain by man. That's very Old Testament stuff. There's also Galatians 5:13, which is where I think libertarians totally misinterpret the concept of freedom in general. For you were called to freedom, brothers, only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love, serve one another. I think libertarians can more accurately be described as licentiousness-tarians or libertines. Libertinism, as opposed to liberty, being the freedom to basically pursue your own preferred method of self-destruction. Okay, perform any rampant degeneracy that you want to, intake drugs, perform sodomy on other men, any of them. Whereas actual liberty was understood as, basically the freedom to do good. Okay, whereas I believe now libertarians believe in do what thou wilt mentality, which I once again very satanic. So that's my case.
Alrighty, Matthew, your take on conservatism. If you have any Bible verses to maybe back up your libertarian views, you may take the stand.
Okay, awesome. So I won't respond to you because I'm giving my points on conservatism. But
should I interject here? I guess I will for a second. I think the real principle to draw out of Old Testament law, and I'll expand on this a little bit more when he kind of addresses it, is the reason why, because you see in the New Testament, you don't really see much of a discussion of government, like having laws reflect Christian morality or whatever. And this is kind of what the anti-Christian nationalist or whatever will use, to say, well, that's just not biblically New Testament grounded. I think the difference is that, ancient Israel was a Jewish land meant for the Jewish people, right? Hence why it's governed by Jewish laws and Jewish morality, right? The Mosaic law and stuff were meant to govern the land as legal principles, right? Now, in the context of the social and political environment that the New Testament existed in and our new covenant was formed in, right, was, in a societal situation where Christians were the minority. They were not, they were basically a minority everywhere, right? Because even in Israel, the religious and political authorities opposed the early Christians. And then in the greater Roman Empire, we know it to be the same thing, right? And so I think a lot of the guidance you see in the New Testament is guidance for Christians in minority lands, in Gentile lands, how to operate and how to function in that context, right? So, but when it comes to the fact that America, you look at the founding of America, we talk about this all the time, even the early colonies, the majority of them were founded as kind of refuges for certain sects of Christians. Then in that context, then I think it would be generally more appropriate to lean towards, not all the way, because I think our system inherently is not as homogenous as maybe ancient Israel was, right? Because, America obviously was founded as this kind of like religiously diverse in a Christian sense, specifically in a lot of ways, mostly a Protestant sense, but religiously diverse among Christians. And so, yeah, you can't have as direct of like theocratic law. And I don't think that's how our system was set up. But because this was built as a Christian land for Christians, hence you can apply that more than simply saying, well, the New Testament doesn't directly endorse, theocracy. So therefore, it is unbiblical to support any degree of religious morality reflected in law. I don't believe that. I don't buy that at all. So, I think it's a matter of, and I think understanding the Bible reflects this is like, it depends whose lands these are, right? You know what I mean? The Roman Empire was entirely pagan dominated, right? The religious authorities in Israel at the time of Jesus rejected Christ, right? And so this is what you end up with. And this is why the New Testament is written in the context of like a persecuted minority trying to operate and trying to spread the gospel in a society that does not, in lands specifically, that does not share that faith. I think what you get in the Old Testament, like I keep saying, is how to write or legislate morality or whatever when you're in lands that belong to you religiously, if that makes sense. So
my overall stance on conservatives is nothing negative. I believe that it all comes from good intentions of wanting to see good in the world. I just believe the tactics are flawed and in some areas actually very contradictory to the Bible. So in terms of this like crammed down nature of morality on an unwilling people, it's not very biblical, because in Romans, I believe, Romans 1 verse 24, it says, quote, "Therefore God gave them up into the lusts of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves," end quote. So it's been established throughout all of the Bible that like if you continue to live in sin, God will just give you over to that sin. No forcing you into doing it. Like if we have laws that force people to be good, it's going to be disingenuous. It's going to be ineffective, as we've seen with all kinds of laws, and it's not going to create actual good people. And then in turn,
okay, so on this point, couple things. So I think firstly, you can't force someone to be good, but you can influence someone to be good. You can make the way you approach something like education and culture in a society inevitably, and I think this is common sense, and I'll talk about why I think it's also like biblically grounded too, but I think it's common sense really. If people are raised or brought up with environmental factors that drive them more or that favor them more toward, or at least encourage them to go in a certain direction, yes, you're always going to have people that slip through the cracks. You're always going to have people who they decide to go their own way and they become a nuisance to society or whatever. The vast majority of people will ultimately go the way that the societal and political and cultural institutions push them. Okay, this is true. And the Bible does talk extensively. I mean, I don't have verses like just prepared here, or maybe I should have done that. But the Bible talks extensively about, fellowship, about keeping your brothers in Christ, in line, trying to keep them in the faith. It talks about, the punishment and the consequences for people who lead, especially, we know the famous verse, especially with the little ones, but who lead people away from the faith, right? And it also teaches us directly to go and make disciples of all the nations, spread the gospel to people. The books of Paul are full of stories of literally in like the book of Acts, for instance, is literally all about the apostles and stuff spreading the gospel to people, right? And so I think he's taking that verse out of context, right? Yes, what the verse is basically saying is like, yeah, when you give yourself to sin, you're going to face the consequences of it. You're going to be trapped in it or whatever. But it's not saying that like, oh, you can't influence people to come to Christ or come to the gospel or come to something more moral, even like in a political or cultural sense. I don't think that's what the verse is saying at all. I don't think that's the context of the verse. And I think that's, I think the fact that like half the New Testament is full of examples of people changing and influencing hearts and minds and souls shows that that's just not what's being said there. So
in terms of kind of on the same thread here.
And right, is this guy saying that laws that outlaw things like murder are bad because it forces people to be good? And we talk about this all the time too, by the way, but you can legislate morality, and actually you do. Right? Yeah, that's the thing. People accept status quos very easily, or get used to status quos at least over time. And so laws that have been status quos, for centuries or even decades are brought into most people to just think this is normal and that's just the way they think, right? Even think about something like let's just take like seatbelts for an example. Wearing a seatbelt, at least for most people, I don't know about all people, but for the majority of people, wearing a seatbelt now is like second nature, right? And especially we have a mostly younger audience. Everyone was raised, put on your seatbelt or whatever when you get in the car. It's second nature. You would never think to drive off without it. Well, most seatbelt laws weren't even a thing until like the 80s and 90s. Before that, most people didn't even wear seatbelts. Seatbelts existed. They were kind of optional. A lot of people didn't wear them. But this is an example of how something becomes a very easily accepted societal norm when it becomes law. People just accept it. Most people don't even question it because that's how most people are, right? Gay marriage, for instance, is a strong example of this. In 1997, 70% of Americans opposed gay marriage. Now, because it has become law as of just only about 7 years ago, it is now such a universally accepted consensus by now apparently 70% of the population, right? 70% of Americans support same-sex marriage. This is what, you absolutely can, legislate morality and social consensuses into power actually very easily. It's really not that complicated, and it happens all the time. And like murder, that's an easy example of it. You know what I mean? And it's very funny too, because obviously maybe we're more politically adjusted or whatever, so we might give a different answer. The truth of the matter is, if you ask a bunch of people on the street, why is murder wrong? Why is robbery wrong? Why is theft wrong? The second answer they might give is, oh, you're taking a life. You're taking something that's not yours. I bet you a lot of people will literally say because it's illegal. Because that's just the truth. That's how most people think. Oh, it's illegal. It must be bad. It's legal. It must be okay. People are so insanely inclined to think like this. It's not even funny. And you can observe this all the time. So the idea that like you can't legislate the way people think, that's just ridiculous. If you can't legislate the way people think, then, explain. I mean, this is an extreme example. I'm not in support of North Korea, but like explain North Korea. If everyone has their own agency or whatever, well, then how did all? I'm not endorsing the North Korean governmental system. I'm just pointing them out as an example of like, actually, the government can legislate morality quite easily and legislate what people think quite easily, not by forcing them, beating them with a stick until they think it. Just by influencing them in the sense that when something is so common all around you and becomes the norm, most people internalize it. 80% of any human population internalizes it. Hence why, murder being illegal for the most part works, right? Now, we have a murder rate. There are people who do murder, but the reason why the vast majority of society does not do murder and doesn't even consider doing it is, again, because it's illegal. It's illegal. And it's societally stigmatized so much because it's illegal,
Here.
So
it says in Matthew 10, verse 4, and whosoever shall not, this is for context purposes, when God is about to leave earth, or Jesus is about to leave earth, and he's talking to his disciples, giving them the Great Commission. It says in quote, and whosoever shall not receive you, nor hear the words, when ye depart out of that city or house, shake off the dust of your feet. So we're supposed to, as Christians, fulfill the Great Commission, try to spread God's word, but when they reject us, then we give them over to their sins, essentially. So when it comes to...
Again, I think that, no one's saying go force people to accept Christ, right? I don't think it's biblical to literally, stand there with a gun and say you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, or I'm going to kill you, okay? I don't think any actual Christian believes that or wants that. I think the point that we're making is twofold. There's a point I brought up earlier, which is the fact that if this is a Christian land, which I believe that it is, then in the same sense that ancient Israel was governed by its kind of religious norms to maybe a lesser degree because of the nature of America and the way it differs from Israel, but ancient Israel, but still to a strong extent is going to be governed, or it should be governed by at least an understanding of kind of that nature or whatever. But the second point of this is that I think that we should want a society. Yes, I don't think it's the job of government to directly spread the gospel, right? But we should want a society and we should want a culture that is conducive, if that's the right word, if that is favorable, I will say, to seeing more souls saved, right? And so I definitely think that in a society and a culture like ours today, where Christianity is so stigmatized, it's hated, there's rampant vice and profligacy everywhere. I mean, I think it's common sense. Overall, this is a society that is harder to spread the gospel than maybe the America of 100 years ago. Right? We should want in America where it is easiest to do this. Okay. So that's kind of my stance on it.
Why I just have a problem with the conservatism is that, one, it's not the way God wants us to go about spreading his word. So when you try to cram down your morality on someone else, it doesn't end well. And then the other factor why
it's not about using force to spread his word. Again, it's about wanting a society that is favorable to spreading his word in a private manner in terms of churches and whatnot, right? Like, let's just say like a Muslim country as an example, right? To show you how this kind of social science aspect of it works. if you grow up in, let's just say, Saudi Arabia, where everyone is Muslim, Islam is crammed down on everything, you know, heavy cultural influence, culture is controlled or whatever by Muslim rules, Muslim ideas, Muslim people. So, you know, that might not necessarily mean you yourself turn out Muslim. I don't know. In Saudi Arabia, you probably have to. But just as an example, pretending you do have this choice, that might not necessarily mean you turn out Muslim or come to accept it. But because it is familiar to you, because it is around you, because it is encouraged and promoted around you, I would make the pretty strong calculation that an average person born in Saudi Arabia is more likely to become Muslim than a person born in, you know, I don't know, America even, right? America, a country that's not like majority Muslim or whatever, right? Because that's just how it works. That's just how it goes. You know, Christian lands, we want to have Christians in all lands, but to the extent to which there's this kind of like tribal or whatever aspect to it, it's common sense that Christian lands will have more Christians than non-Christian lands, right? Because this is how it works. So, you know,
against it is because if you ever lose the levers of power and you've established all,
doesn't just have to be private. I mean like government, yeah, obviously in the public arena, and public prayer and all that. I mean like the government, you know, like pointing a gun at you and making you do that.
That power that you can wield, you're setting yourself up for someone you greatly disagree with to cram down their version on you.
People also tend to rationalize and come out to what they are surrounded by. This is why popular culture is so pervasive. No, exactly. Literally the case.
Okay. So do you think we should move into...
It's a very pseudo-intellectual take. Oh, we can't legislate morality. Explain law, explain morality. Yes, you can legislate morality. Of course you can. And we've explained this a million times. I feel like it's not even worth like talking about at this point. But
your questions, or do you think we should have a little back and forth? What do you...
I mean, you guys
I'm interested in
can move
questions.
into so
like, okay, do you put on your seatbelt? Do you instinctively at this point ask yourself this question? When you get in a car, do you instinctively put on your seatbelt? Now, I'm sure we have some real lawbreakers, some real outlaws, some real you know, Tony Hawk daredevils out here who don't do that. But the reality is the vast majority of you guys do that. You don't even think about it. You just do it. Literally, the fact that you do that is proof that you can legislate morality, because that was not a social norm in like the 1970s or 80s. Seatbelt laws became a thing like federally, not federally, but just nationally everywhere in like the 80s and 90s and stuff. And look at where you are now. Look, it's instinct. It's second nature to you. Yes, you can legislate morality. Okay, and that's like a prime example of
questions. I'll
that
start
being
with
done.
This wasn't number one on my list, but since you guys seem to both brought it up. Where do rights and morality come from, and how should they be used or not in government?
Wow. Okay. I'll go first again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we can switch that up after.
Yeah. You go first next.
Your rights obviously all come from God. I definitely say that, and they're protected by the government. But I certainly don't think that your rights extend to being free from governing authority to do literally anything that you want, provided that it doesn't physically hurt another person or their property. Main reason for this being, there is nothing that you do, whether it be in the privacy of your own home or out in public, that doesn't affect anybody else.
They did. Well, they did. And look at where you are now. Look at where you are now. It's true.
Affect how you behave in public. And that's going to affect people. And again, as it said in Romans, I believe that it very clearly states that we should have laws. And, you know, as other portions of the Old Testament clearly state.
I mean, that's true to an extent, but no one's saying to force it. People are saying to encourage it. But you can encourage it with government. You can encourage it with the way you craft your society. You see what I'm saying?
Enforce those laws on people. All right, your rights, they're pretty clearly laid out in the Constitution. I'd say they do a pretty good job. I'd say the founding fathers did a pretty good job because they were all Christians and they all understood this.
All righty.
Just to clarify, the question was, where did they come from? What was the second part?
They weren't all Christians, by the way, but the better ones were Christian.
Okay. We did come from God.
For the most part, the better ones were Christian.
For government purposes. the role of government, in my view, is to protect life, liberty, and property, as said by Thomas Locke. John Locke.
John Locke. Okay.
So, I mean, you brought up an interesting point that if you do something behind closed doors, it still impacts
John
society at
Locke,
large,
of course,
and therefore
of
it's
course.
unregulated. If you take that to the extreme, and the government inevitably will, you essentially want to regulate people's thoughts. And I have a major issue with that. That's why it should only be the things that, if you're going to harm yourself, that's your prerogative. You have the free will to seek after God or not to. But if you're going to take your perspective to its full extreme, you're controlling everything.
And you guys are free to debate now.
Okay, notice, so they always libertarians do this a lot. They're like, well, if you regulate big tech, don't you know that's literally going to make like Hitler 2 or Stalin 2 or whatever? And it's like, you know, I think it's a pretty big logical reach, but playing to this logic, on the other hand, I could say to that, well, if you let libertarians have their way, it's going to just devolve into anarchy, because that's a slippery slope of that too. You know, it's like, oh, but if it goes to its logical extreme, okay, what happens when libertarianism goes to its logical extreme? When libertarianism goes to its logical extreme, you have anarchy. You do. Even if you don't even have we have minarchy. What you're still probably going to end up with is a functional state of anarchy. And I don't see, and this might be a hot take, I don't think anarchy is worse than dictatorship or authoritarianism or totalitarianism. Or no, sorry, I don't think it's better. Sorry, let me rephrase that. I don't think anarchy is actually morally better than totalitarianism, right? Neither are preferable necessarily. Okay. In some cases, some forms of totalitarianism might be worse, but in other ways, they arguably could be better, right? Like, I would rather have, for instance, as one, and people always talk about, oh, the protection of rights or whatever. Your rights are not protected in anarchy, right? In a chaotic state of anarchy, in many ways, I'd argue that's almost less preferable to live in. Neither are preferable to live in, let me be clear, but is less preferable to live in than a very despotic kind of totalitarian state where at least there's order and there's some protection of like human life or whatever, you know what I mean? Which I understand in some totalitarian governments that's not recognized or whatever. But the point I'm really getting at is this whole dichotomy of, oh, well, you know, total autocracy or whatever must be horrible. If there were an autocrat with total power that was, for the most part, pretty good, as compared to a state of anarchy where everyone's getting killed, I would take the autocrat. I would take the dictator or whatever, right? But it's just funny, though, because we never look at anarchy in the same kind of horrible light that we ever do dictatorship or tyranny or whatever. Even though I'd argue anarchy is a form of tyranny, right? And so I don't really know what I'm trying to say here. Really, the point I'm trying to get at is like, they will throw this out here to always say, well, if we have it your way, you're just going to descend down the slippery slope of dictatorship. Well, who's to say you're not going to descend down the slippery slope of anarchy? Which one is actually better? In fact, I would take Blake's views being represented in a dictatorship over this guy's views being represented in an anarchy like any day of the week, right? So I think, honestly, we have to start like morally viewing anarchy as just as bad as dictatorship or tyranny or whatever. Actually, we should see anarchy as a form of tyranny, and arguably one of the worst forms of tyranny that there is, right? So
Okay.
If you have any response.
So it's interesting that you brought up Locke, because very few people know this about Locke. He didn't believe that atheists should be afforded the right to free speech.
Okay.
based.
So I'd say that that's pretty,
Real? Yo, what?
That's fine. I didn't say I agree with everything you said.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just saying
yeah.
the purpose of government, he got that part right.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't see the connection. I don't see the slippery slope going in that direction of us being able to regulate anybody's thoughts, from us saying, hey.
No, there hasn't. There hasn't. People will say that's because of the fall of man. That's actually not true. The kingdom of heaven is number one, a monarchy. But number two, this whole idea that like Oh, well, laws and this since they're talking about Christianity and stuff, I feel like this is a relevant point to bring up. There's this kind of concept when it comes to laws and legislation and public policy that governments or whatever, and government and law is a necessary creation because man is fallen or whatever. And that's actually not true. That's actually not true. Heaven has rule of law. It has, you could kind of basically, it has government. It definitely has order and hierarchy, to say the least, right? And fundamentally, what Adam and Eve did, and also what Satan and those fallen angels did too, were both rebellions against the law of God, right? And again, this is before the fall, or basically what created the fall, right? What created the fall was a rebellion against law and hierarchy and order, specifically the order of God. And so, no, there's never been a successful libertarian, quote unquote, or anarchist society. And that includes heaven, and that includes before the fall of man,
laws that have been established throughout all of civilized society.
Even if man is perfectly moral, not all people have godlike intelligence. Only God does, actually. Even if man were perfectly moral, who would determine the morality? What would make man perfectly moral? It's true. Man would be perfectly moral if man perfectly followed the will of God 100%. That would be what would make man perfectly moral. It's true.
That we wish to return to. Basically, don't be a prostitute, for one.
I didn't say John Locke was based. I said it was based that he didn't think
right.
atheists should have the right to free speech. I know John Locke's not based.
And that includes, hurting yourself.
How are you going to make it illegal to kill yourself?
Well, I mean, you certainly can't.
Okay. I was just
all right. That might not have been the best example, but let's say you're taking black tar or cutting yourself. Okay. If someone cuts themselves, and this isn't necessarily a sense where you would punish them, but that's the situation where you take them in to get help. But doing black tar heroin, or more specifically, and I'm using black tar heroin just because it's the most extreme possible example of a illicit drug. Selling black tar heroin into the market, I don't see how you would have any right to do that. I don't see why you should have any right to do that. We've always regulated what's been on any market ever. See, here's the thing about libertarianism. It's never been tried. It's never actually been done. Unless you look at a country like some random country in Africa, Zimbabwe, or insert random Uganda, insert random non-developed African country here.
Funny story on that front. I remember years ago, I was arguing with one of those. So when I say I went down my libertarian phase, let me make it clear. I never ended up at the minarchist, just hyper capitalist yellow and black, or yellow and blue, even profile picture libertarian. I always still supported Trump even as a libertarian, and still kind of supported mainstream conservative causes. But I remember one time arguing with this hyper minarchist whatever guy on Politigram. Do you guys remember Politigram? Remember when that was a thing? Remember when political Instagram was a thing? Oh, the days of that. But I remember bringing up Somalia, and I was like, yeah, Somalia is what happens when you have anarchy, bro. And this guy responds back to me. He said, bro, did you know Somalia's economy actually did better when there was no government than before? Back when it had government? I was like, okay, dude, okay. That's libertarianism at its extreme. Average libertarian. Bro, Somalia actually had better economic growth when there was no government, bro. I don't know if that's true. Apparently, maybe that is true. I mean, to be fair, the government before it literally was socialistic, communistic, whatever. I know it was a leftist government or whatever. So, I guess I can understand why maybe there's an improvement, but really that's your defense of anarchy. The GDP improved. Yeah, people are all killing each other with rocket launchers, and we have, Black Hawk Down and all this stuff. And Captain Phillips is going around, we have literal pirates, but the Somalian economy actually got better. Yeah. Maybe because they're piracy and stuff like that, and illegal arms trade. I'd have to assume that's actually a pretty big part of the Somali GDP, but this is true. I remember that. That was
every
quite
nation
funny.
ever
But the
has had
GDP,
laws.
like
Every
I'm not
nation.
joking, by the way. This happened. Okay, this was real. This was a real interaction I had circa like 2018, 2019. Captain Phillips single-handedly carried the Somalian economy. Real. Okay. And Somalia, if you guys remember that movie based on the true story, but they were going to bribe them. Remember they, yeah. The pirates or whatever wanted a bribe of like $50 million or whatever. I'm telling you, if they just paid the bribe instead of, doing an epic sniper shot or whatever, Somalia, that would have been like the Somali Rescue Act, the Anarchy Reduction Act. And Somalia would be like on Wakanda levels right now, unironically.
And ever has had
just true.
regulations on people's behavior.
And
not
every
just-
nation ever has gotten corrupted and had dictatorial tendencies, if not outright dictatorships.
How are you going to prevent that with libertarianism?
That's a good question. So the ultimate thing about any government is that it can be corrupted, but we're starting at the baseline, so it would take so much to get to that point where it becomes a dictatorship that you have a bigger buffer than anything else.
So I want to keep this real pragmatic, and I meant to say this at the beginning of the debate because we live in America
Again, so if government can be corrupted, then a libertarian government also can be corrupted, right? Because this is what libertarians always say. Oh, well, if you give people political leaders more power, what if they become corrupted and use that power? But, if, again, libertarians can do that too, you know what I mean? Which I think America, in their eyes, would be an example of that. Because supposedly, according to I know there's some libertarians that are actually like anti-founding fathers, anti-constitution, but supposedly, according to the libertarians, the founders set up this totally like perfect and just system where everyone's freedom was protected and we were never going to have tyranny again. And then, well, look where we are today, right? And so clearly, the libertarian system or whatever can become corrupted too. But then I'd make the argument on the other end, which is even if they're not corrupted towards absolute power, they could also be corrupted towards just not enforcing law, right? Like anarcho-tyranny, like living in it's kind of an example, living in like a liberal city, right? You could get to that point too. And I'd argue a person in that society where they can't even walk down the street without getting robbed, that's just as much of a tyranny as, I don't know, government agents doing that, right? It's the same thing. So...
as it is right now, and we need solutions for fixing America as it is right now. So on that, how do you think that we are going to be able to eliminate the government from the top down as it stands right now and bring us to a place where the only function of government is to stop people from killing each other or stealing other people's property?
Just to clarify, by eliminate, you don't mean like
power never likes a vacuum. Real
overthrow, or do you mean just like
real
diplomatically?
I'm gonna take out the revolution/overthrow part because I'd say at this point, libertarians talk about that all the time. Oh, my Second Amendment, we're gonna take them down.
It's true though too. Like history is actually full of I know libertarians will say, well, they weren't libertarian, but it's still true to a large extent. History is full of examples of weak governments being weak governments in terms of power, in terms of using power, in many ways hands off to, in many cases, the problems of the people. History is full of examples of weak governments being overthrown by strong leaders and strong governments. Okay, that's just the reality of the situation. It's very common. It's arguably more common in history than the reverse, right? So I would almost argue that if you don't want your system to be overthrown by some type of all-swallowing totalitarian dystopian system, then what you should do is have a system that reasonably and kind of in a measured, rational sense uses power effectively and wields power effectively, as opposed to chasing this idealism of total freedom, right? Because I'd argue a system that can a more liberty favoring system, maybe like the American Republic, that can defend itself and can keep itself in power and protect its power and kind of protect its people is actually less susceptible to, I don't know, Marxist revolution or whatever than is, the society that this guy wants or whatever, right?
Shoot, I don't want to get banned off YouTube by talking about this, but it's never happened. Okay, and there are cases here or there of we live here in Texas. Obviously, there's what's it called? What's that place right down about an hour away?
Alamo. The Alamo?
No, not the Alamo.
Waco.
It's literally an hour away. It was when the ATF went to their building and there was a massive shootout.
Oh, Waco.
Waco, thank you. Obviously, there have been instances here or there, but after COVID, if the libertarians were going to stand up against tyranny then, I truly don't think that they ever will. So I don't believe that that's a viable solution. I don't believe that that's a viable answer to the question of how to get your policies instituted. And I know you brought up the point earlier about in 4 years, if your guys get in, they use all this power. Next people get in, it's all over. So we're just back to square one because the left is already using power against us in a massive way that we've never seen before. But in terms of
the whole idea of like if conservatives use power, then liberals will use power back. Like Blake said, number one, they already have, they already are, and then the thing is, number two is that because libertarians specifically, their whole ideology is just based on governmental power. They don't really comprehend this because to them, the slippery slope of governmental power is like one long slippery slope. But the real reality of the situation is it's more something like a mountain on both sides, right? And so if you go down the slippery slope of, say, just the right-wing side of the mountain, liberals can't just take that and then keep rolling because like I said, libertarians again view it as one long slippery slope of no governmental power, all the governmental power. They see it as, liberals will take power and just make things worse and use that against you. But the reality of the situation is, in order for liberals to use their own slippery slope, they would first have to reverse our slippery slope, right? And so they would have to push back up our slippery slope in order to get to the peak of the mountain again so that they can push down their slippery slope, right? An example of this, for instance, would be, just look at something like, so I don't know, and I guess this is considered a big government position by libertarians or whatever, or violation of church and state, but a very common conservative position is that we want prayer in public schools, right? We want to recite a prayer every morning while the kids recite the pledge, right? Or before the kids recite the pledge, I should say. And, I guess the response to that would be, if you're going to insert your morality on public institutions, then the left can take power and do that too. It's like, yeah, I guess they can, but what would they have to do? First, they'd have to get into power, and the first step would be they'd have to repeal our thing. They'd have to repeal prayer in school, get rid of that, and then they would have to next institute their own policy of their own, CRT or whatever. Like, you see how that works? It's not one long slippery slope that the both sides are going down the same way. They first would have to get rid of our thing, push back up our slippery slope until they can next start pushing down their own morality, right? First, they have to get rid of our thing or repeal our thing and then do their own thing. It's not like they take our thing and then suddenly just use it to do their thing. Big tech is another example of this. They say, if you regulate big tech, if you protect free speech on social media, then that's a use of governmental power that the left is going to use against you. It's like, how? How are they going to use it against us? Okay, so conservatives want free speech protected on big tech platforms, at least in the current state of things. Liberals want their own ideology being the only thing allowed on social media. Okay, well, how does us protecting free speech on big tech somehow make it easier for liberals to censor big tech? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And the only libertarian response to this is like, governmental power, but that doesn't actually make logical sense. If, let's just say, tomorrow, Republicans made it so that, repeal 230 or reform 230 or whatever, and, they basically made it so that, and the way I would do it probably is just forward-facing legislation. Free speech must be protected on big tech platforms because big tech is a public square, right? In order for liberals to return to the former state of big tech where it's very censored for conservatives, liberals are favored, it's basically kind of a liberal echo chamber, they would first have to repeal our law and then either through political or social means get things back eventually to a state of their control and their power, right? You see how that works? So yes, they could technically take power and and push back and do their own thing, but us using power doesn't make it easier for them to take power later and use power. In fact, it actually makes it harder. You see how that works? You see how that slippery, like I said, it's a slippery slope, not one straight line. It's a slippery slope like a mountain where there's the right side of slippery slope and there's a left side, right? You have to push back up the right side or push back up the left side to push in our direction. Okay, you see how that works? It's not like one long thing or whatever. It just doesn't make sense. You can't just take conservative policy or conservative power and suddenly turn that into liberal power. You have to get rid of the conservative policy in order to implement the liberal policy to counter it. Okay.
Electability, libertarians, there's not much to talk about there. We get about 4% of the national vote on average.
Okay,
so
really quick,
yeah, we do have a super chat.
Super chat. Thanks, Sir Volkerstein. I just found out the Kool-Aid Man plays on a baseball team. He's the pitcher. God bless you all. Thanks, Sir Volkerstein.
We really appreciate that. Yeah, we're gonna have to pause for any super chats.
Yeah, and then happy. Yeah,
a form
you
of
can
debate.
you can hop back into it.
Libertarian. This is a comment, by the way. This is my thoughts. Libertarianism is like non-alcoholic beer. I respect some ideals of
real. So true, Lionos. People want to say, "Oh, well, First Amendment, this and that." It's like, okay. Well, how about we just don't recognize them as a religion then, huh? How about that? How about, at the very least, they have to be taxed and whatnot like a normal institution. They don't get to LARP as a religion when they're not. It's true. It's so true.
I feel like they were one step away from true conservatism, but are afraid of the social repercussions. Now, Matt, you don't need to respond to that specifically, but if you want to,
I want to respond to Blake. So we veered a little bit off of. So you're talking about the diplomatic implementation of my.
Yeah, I want to know your
ideals.
pragmatic solution.
So let's first of all distinguish between the LP and people that are liberty minded.
Okay.
This is a phrase we use a lot for my company. The LP has several flaws. I don't want to talk bad about them too much, but they're bad at marketing.
This guy works for Young Americans for Liberty, for context.
At being able to get votes, as you covered, which I do find a little bit interesting that you both point out they get 4% of the vote, but yet also blame all of the liberal problems on libertarianism. I find that a little bit ironic.
I will. I'll elaborate
on
that.
What's more? Raleigh Gonzalez says, "What's more common, libertarian to conservative, or conservative to libertarian?" I think it's both. I think they're about equal because I think most people start out conservative, at least younger people, like people our age. They start out conservative, become libertarian, and then eventually they grow up and become conservative again, right? I think libertarianism in a lot of ways is like a very puberty-esque ideology. It's just mostly teenagers. Like, that's the truth. People come into politics because of conservatism. They're reeled in by certain people to a more libertarian direction, and then as they grow up, they just come back. And I think you can tell this because a lot of maybe libertarians in high school and stuff are decently adjusted people or whatever, but when you look like over the age of 20, look at like the Libertarian National Convention or whatever, it just looks like a bunch of Redditors. If you'll remember, whoever was there on that one stream where we reacted to the whole Reason TV doc about the new Mises Caucus or whatever, interviewing people at the Libertarian National Convention and all that, you can really see what it really is a movement of overgrown children, right? It's a bunch of children and that's why they're so Reddit tier. That's why they look ridiculous and act ridiculous, because they're a bunch of like 16-year-olds that never grew up, right? And that basically is libertarianism is an ideology and a movement of overgrown children. Because if you're taking it seriously after you're like 20, 22 years old, I mean, there's a failure to grow up. And, again, you see that in the type of people who support the Libertarian Party. It's very common.
The method that you use to take over is one, a bottom-up approach. This is a lot of the stuff I do in my job, and you run as Republicans. You can't run as LPs. It's unviable. But through the work I've done with my company, and not me, my company, we've been able to get over 250 state legislators elected that are pro-liberty, that subscribe to these ideals, and they are making a difference.
When you say pro,
So let me say this: Young American. He works for Young Americans for Liberty. Obviously, I have some familiarity with them because, I have, I too operate to some extent in like nonprofit conservative politics. What I will say about YAL is I think they're very good at getting behind like a bunch of local candidates and stuff. They're very good at getting specifically a lot of like state legislator people elected and all of that. The thing is about the candidates they get behind, which is very interesting, most of them aren't really that libertarian, right? What they really are is they're just based, you know what I mean? They just want to run as very hard right-wing candidates. Those typically tend to be the type of people that YAL gets behind more so than like, just pseudo-intellectual hyper-libertarians like this guy or whatever, you know what I mean? Like usually the reason why YAL gets behind a state legislator candidate or whatever, usually they get behind people who are actually pretty conservative and pretty like hard right, just right wing, pro Trump and all that. But it's because they take very aggressive stances on things like the Second Amendment. That's a big thing, right? And so you have like the people who just want to be as right wing as possible, run as right wing as possible. Obviously, they're going to run as pro gun as possible, right? And in many cases, they want to, cut down on the administrative state, cut down on bureaucracy and all this. And because they're so attached to Trump's drain the swamp messaging and all that, they're very aggressive against that stuff too. But that's about it, right? That's about it. They want to cut taxes, sure, but that's about it, right? I think the majority of YAL candidates you ask, hey, what's your thoughts on like big tech? They would tell you, I think free speech should be protected on big tech. What's your thoughts on trade? We should have an America First trade policy and all this. It's really that YAL kind of picks people, you would say in a pretty wise sense, and I kind of respect that they do this. They pick conservative candidates who are like the best on issues like the Second Amendment and like waging war against the administrative state and all that stuff. All the good stuff that like we probably agree with YAL or whatever on, they'll pick kind of on those issues and ignore sort of the rest and push their candidates based on that. And as a result, they have what you definitely acknowledge and give them credit for is a very successful operation when it comes to endorsing and electing very solid candidates, right-wing candidates, and being pretty successful in terms of actually getting them into a lot of state legislatures around the country, right? But, again, and by the way, this has been a topic that YAL has gotten a lot of criticism from actual libertarians, right? I've seen plenty of libertarians, throughout the years actually criticize Young Americans for Liberty because they say it's too conservative. It's not libertarian enough. The people they get behind are not libertarian enough. They get behind conservatives too often. And, but that's important to point out, right? Is that the candidates that YAL is supposedly getting elected, they are not these like hyper libertarian Ayn Rand LP tier candidates. They're just like based Republicans, which I appreciate that YAL is getting behind, but that's important to acknowledge. Like Anthony Sabatini, for instance, which I'm not going to like try to draw a wedge between their professional relationship or whatever, but Anthony Sabatini was one of YAL's big candidates this cycle around. And the reason for that is because Sabatini, very pro-gun, very anti-administrative state and all that stuff. But Sabatini's also of the position that, private companies should not be allowed to censor conservatives. They should not be allowed to enforce vax mandates or whatever. Those were big issues of his campaign and of his record in the Florida state legislature. He's one of the biggest voices of going after private vaccine tyranny. As a matter of fact, he wanted basically like civil rights protection based on your vaccination status. So very aggressive action against, private institutions when it comes to woke tyranny or whatever. He's very aggressive on it. One of the best there is on it. But YAL endorsed them because, again, they agree on taxes and the Second Amendment and bureaucracy or whatever, which is fine. But that's just what's important to point out about libertarians and the feasibility of libertarians. These are not hyper-libertarian candidates that YAL is getting behind and getting elected. It's really more like just based conservatives, which again, I don't have a problem with. I'm glad they're giving to those our type of candidates more so than what really should be their type of candidates. But it's just important to point out when this guy says this operation is so successful or whatever, you look at the type of candidates they're getting behind. They're more like our guys and less like your guys. Like, that's actually the truth.
Liberty,
So,
I gotta ask, are these people so libertarian to the point where, like, I don't let me straw man you.
I got
your
you.
basic belief of the
Rowley Gonzalez says, as someone who worked for Yal, I can verify Vince is 100% right about Yal candidates. So true. So true. Thank you, Rowley. Thank you. Thank you. It's so true. And so you can't, again, this guy, to take credit for those candidates from his positions, it's just dishonest. It's just dishonest. They're really honestly more Trump candidates, like principally Trump candidates than they are principally Christian libertarian candidates.
goal of government is they should protect people from being harmed by others and having their property harmed by others. Are all of these people who, obviously not all of them, but how many of these people do you think are along those same ideological lines?
Pretty much 100%.
100%.
Hold on.
Are all of them being
Let's
harmed?
rewind that again.
The role of government is they should protect people from being harmed by others and having their property harmed by others. Are all of these people who, obviously not all of them, but how many of these people do you think are along those same ideological lines?
Pretty much 100%.
100%.
Yeah.
So none of them are, say, against like private companies enforcing vaccine passports.
Against vaccine passports?
Against private companies.
Sorry,
I shouldn't use vaccine passports, but say vaccine requirements.
Like on a personal basis or legally speaking?
Legally speaking.
They would not oppose a private company doing their own thing.
Okay. So how many of these people are...
That's just not true. This guy doesn't even know his own candidates. This guy doesn't even know the type of candidates that Yal endorses. Why am I like more informed on his employer than he is? That's just not true. That's just not true, dude. Okay. Sabatini, for instance, as one example, has spoken out like all the Yal conferences. I assume, I know he spoke at the last one endorsed by Yal. That was one of his big endorsements or whatever. And again, I don't have a problem with him doing that. I think it's good that he's building kind of this crossover coalition based on the right issues on the right or whatever. But Sabatini is literally the biggest opponent in the whole Florida state legislature, a bigger opponent than Ron DeSantis. Okay. Ron DeSantis is, big government or whatever. Sabatini is to the right of Ron DeSantis on this vaccine mandate issue. Sabatini wanted civil rights protections based on your vaccination status. Like that far to the right on the position, which is further right than what DeSantis and the state legislature were pushing, right? Because according to the bill that the state of Florida pushed through, you cannot, and this was how the bill went. It was basically like, you cannot be fired from a private employer based on your vaccination status. But the bill also included kind of provisions or loopholes to where like you can't be fired, but they can do things like make you wear a mask or whatever, whereas the other employees don't have to do it. What Sabatini wanted to do and was pushing in the state legislature was, again, civil rights protections. So that way, not only can you not be fired, you cannot be discriminated against in any way for any reason based on your vaccine status, right? And so this whole practice of, oh, well, you have to work in a separate cubicle or you have to wear a mask to work. He was trying to push the bill further to the right to say private companies can't even do that. This is one of your big candidates, dude. And I also on that point, I actually prepared this. I because I did see this part of the debate. Okay. Yao as an organization, basically, you could say like father of the org. I believe Ron Paul might have actually founded Yao. I'm not sure about that. I might be mistaken on that. But Ron Paul is basically the figurehead of Yao. He speaks at all the conferences. Yao loves this guy. They align all of their politics off of the politics of Ron Paul. Okay. Well, hold on. Let's take a look at here. This is a Facebook post from Ron Paul as of 2018. Again, Ron Paul, don't try to spin this as I disagree with Ron Paul or my org does not support Ron Paul. Again, Ron Paul, as anyone who's familiar with Young Americans for Liberty, Ron Paul is literally the face of Young Americans for Liberty, of that organization. Well, here's Ron Paul in 2018, and I quote, and by the way, I don't fully agree with this post, but, just as to show you what Ron Paul believes, he says, We live in an age of government plus business tyranny. Huh. That's interesting. And by the way, I heard Ron Paul say this fairly recently too. I couldn't find the monologue, but I know he talked about how like woke capitalism is actually just as much of a threat to freedom as like conventional tyranny or whatever. I couldn't find that clip, but I could find this here. We live in an age of government plus business tyranny. It's really no different than the prior age of government plus church tyranny. Again, I disagree. Cringe. I think it's very different. I don't think the former was actually tyranny or whatever. But still, regardless, you see what he's trying to say? Church and state was replaced with big business and state. Huh. That's very interesting. Let me enlarge the screen here because I know it's kind of small here. That's very interesting, isn't it? Ron Paul shares this stance on private tyranny. He says we live in an age of government and business tyranny, and he compares it to like the theocratic church and state or whatever thing, which again, I don't agree with that, but still, you know, there we go. The same must be done with business. Persuasion must be blah, blah, blah. It's just, it's real. It's real. So you have, for instance, let's read this post. By the way, this is not as like, aggressive as the monologue I saw him do more recently on this issue, but again, I couldn't find that. The same must be done with business. Persuasion must be the businessman's only tool in obtaining customers and clients. Voluntary exchanges, blah blah blah. No more government force. No more government and business partnerships. Huh? Kind of like the government and the FDA approving a vaccine and then getting all of the companies to make a mandate based on that, right? Or big tech going off of the whims of the FBI and the regime and the Biden administration. It's quite interesting, huh? It's quite interesting. I wonder if our libertarian friend from this debate would agree with Ron Paul on this position. So, yeah. Hold on. It won't let me go back. Okay, here we go.
Childbirth is a very good thing. We got to get our birth rate back up. We got to get people born again. You know?
Were we here? I thought
we're gonna go for the guy that's gonna ban bomb stocks.
Yeah.
This is the last.
Oh yeah, we were back here. My bad.
From being harmed by others.
We might. I'm thinking of maybe we're only like a quarter of the way through the debate. I'm thinking of splitting the stream into two. I don't know what you guys think of that. I guess we could just finish it. Why not? But we could split it into two. And then do Q&A for the next hour, like after we hit like the 35-minute mark-ish, and then finish it tomorrow night. Or I don't know. We'll see how fast we get through this.
Their property harmed by others. Are all of these people who, obviously not all of them, but how many of these people do you think are along those same ideological lines?
Pretty much 100%.
100%.
Again, wrong. Not true. Not even Ron Paul is on that ideological line.
Against vaccine passports?
Against private companies.
Sorry,
I shouldn't use vaccine passports, but say vaccine requirements.
Like on a personal basis or legally speaking?
Legally speaking.
They would not oppose a private company doing their own thing.
Okay. So how many of these...
Again, not true. Not even Ron Paul is on that train.
Ron DeSantis. Would they all have voted against Ron DeSantis in a primary? I'm just curious. I know this isn't much
like
on the scope of the debate.
Obviously, I don't know their personal opinions on that, but I think one thing that a lot of libertarians fail on, in my mind, is just completely writing off a politician they don't 100% agree with.
Not only would they not vote against Ron DeSantis, the vast majority of these YAL candidates, but if Sab is one example, they're actually to the right of Ron DeSantis when it comes to the conservative use of governmental power. So, it's true. Just wanted to point that out.
I voted for Trump. Is he libertarian? Not at all. But he was the best of the options. You have to be realistic and not vote for Joe Jorgensen. That's going to get no votes.
That's a base take, at least.
I wish all libertarians thought that way, because now we're in a hell of a lot of trouble. And I'm going to elaborate on that because you said earlier, how I bring up electability, but you say that I blame libertarians for all of these terrible liberal things going on right now. I mean, this is the case. And, I could summarize this in a meme that I post.
I don't blame libertarian people. I blame libertarian ideas. The libertarian ideas that largely, for the most part, they have they do come from some differing degree of places, but fundamentally, I would blame the most the libertarian ideas that grew out of fusionism, right? of the post-war conservative movement of, you know, William Buckley and Barry Goldwater, which was eventually passed down to Ronald Reagan. The very concept of fusionism, which defines, you know, the current American right, this whole union of essentially social and religious conservatism with economic and political libertarianism. I would argue that that's basically where the ideas have seeped in from, right? And so it's not that people like this are like destroying the conservative movement. It's that, you know, philosophically speaking, the pervasion of libertarian ideas in the conservative sphere has destroyed it
all the time. Where it's this like smug Wojak, and he's like, today I'm gonna vote third party. And he goes and he votes for a libertarian. Then the results come out. The Democrat has 40,000. The Republican has 39,999. And the Libertarian has 1.
Be sure to leave a like on the stream right now, by the way, guys. Everyone watching. Oops. My bad.
And then the Democrat says, no more guns. And the Libertarian is still sitting there all smug. Okay? Because regardless of if you think Trump is anti-Second Amendment because he banned bump stocks, which again, I'm not saying that that's okay. You know, we hate Trump for, you know, there are a lot of things that we agree on. Obviously, you know, gun rights. Not happy at Trump for banning bump stock bans. But I mean, for Pete's sake, they're going to allow Biden to take office. You know, this was.
If the two options are bump stocks or have no guns, we're gonna go for the guy that's gonna ban bump stocks.
Yeah.
This is less
Well, you would like to see that happen, but unfortunately, the rest of the people who vote third party don't quite see it the same way.
It's not an issue with the ideology. It's just some people not being smart with it.
Actually, it is an issue with an ideology. It is. Maybe not even the ideology, just the worldview, I should say. It's an issue with the worldview. Because you know why so many libertarians, I appreciate that this guy at least understands, yeah, voting libertarian is dumb. But the reason why the vast majority, so many, I should say, libertarians that refuse to vote Republican, even when the cost benefit of voting libertarian is clearly not even smart, is because they are all idealistic. They don't really live in reality. They live in idealism. They live in utopianism. Why? Because they are children. As I keep saying, libertarianism is an ideology. It's a movement controlled and ran by what? Overgrown children. It's so true. And so, of course, they're going to, you know, think like that or not think wisely because they're immature. They're like definitionally immature. Libertarians are like immature people. You know, watch like the Reason TV doc of the Libertarian Convention that we watched that one time. You can tell they are immature people. They're childish people. You know, you have the grown men in their 40s acting like, you know, acting like they're 15, 14 years old. They're like they're in middle school or something. Those types of people are drawn to libertarianism because I think are drawn to utopianism in general because, you know, that's the type of it's not exactly the type of train of thinking that you know, very mature people would favor. So
I'll concede on that. You want to move on to the second question or what?
Yeah, I have a question really quick that's actually here. It's a question in chat that was actually very good.
Well, I thought you were gonna read off the super chat.
Oh,
Thanks,
I
Sir
didn't see that.
Volkerstein.
Oh,
$10. Never forget. Alex Jones visited the survivors of the Waco community and helped to build a church for them. He then confronted George Bush over the murder of these innocent people. God bless Alex Jones.
We do love Alex Jones.
George Bush
at the KGB show.
Based Alex Jones. Common Alex Jones W.
Yeah, okay. We all hate George Bush. See, there's a lot of things that conservatives and libertarians can agree on. When it comes to like,
hate George Bush.
Yeah, like we hate George Bush, you know.
On that.
Wait, really quick.
There's actually a really good question.
Yeah, this is a very good question. It says, question for Blake, but I do want to know Matt's thoughts on this as well. Would you agree with the idea that libertarianism would be an ideal form of government if not for the fall of man or our subsequent sinful nature?
Well, if there was no fall of man, there'd be no government necessary. Period.
Yeah,
that's true.
Well, there would.
Not true. That's not true. Again, I actually brought this up earlier in the stream, but that's not true. There is government in heaven. There is order in heaven. The concept of government and commanding hierarchies and whatnot predates the fall of man. In fact, why did the fall of man itself happen? Because man disobeyed the laws of God. Why did the fall of the angels happen? Right? Why did why did Satan and his demons, his fallen angels, why were they booted from heaven? The same reason. They rebelled against the laws, the government, quote unquote, of God. You know, when creation is redeemed, so too will heaven still have government, will still have law, will still have hierarchy, because these things are not a product of the fall of man. And yes, because of the fall of man, they are going to be imperfect. Therefore, there will be no such thing as a perfect governmental system or hierarchy or order here on earth. But it is man that corrupts those perfect principles, right? It is man that corrupts what would otherwise be the perfection of order and hierarchy and government. It is not the fact that order, hierarchy, and government themselves are flawed principles or are corrupted principles. It is that man, because man is corrupted, takes those principles and applies them in a corrupt fashion, right? But even when creation is redeemed, there still will be government. There will still be orders. There will still be order, right? It will be the monarchy of God is what it is, But that's still, again, that's still order. That's still law.
There'd be a monarchy.
Yeah.
It'd be the kingdom of heaven.
Well, yeah.
But no, this is true. I mean, if it were not for the fall of man, the world would be perfect. There would be no need. So I suppose, in a certain sense, yeah, because people would have a much more solid amount of agency than they do right now. They wouldn't be compelled towards sin because of their sinful nature.
Now, I do want to ask Matthew, do you believe that people are inherently good?
I was about to ask that.
Well, this is just a question, because I already know Blake's standpoint. I mean, most 99% of conservatives understand that people have fallen, but I want to understand your thoughts.
Born into sin, so inherently no.
Okay.
You're not good.
Okay.
Based. That's good.
Yes.
Sure. Okay. Cool. Now, Caden, if you have a next question for them.
Next question for them. This might be kind of gay, but I want to see this happen. I'm sure people would like to see this question. Should the government tax, and what should taxes be used for?
Oh,
really? That's what we're gonna debate?
Wait,
come on.
sorry.
Who even cares? Okay, I'm not saying who cares, but this is not what I think conservatives and libertarians should be debating. Oh, the existence of taxes. I think there's a lot more pressing questions that we disagree on and that have more immediate ramifications than the function of taxes. But
this one's a little bit of a tough one. There are actual Bible verses where God says if you owe taxes, pay your taxes, etc. So on a moral stance, it's hard to say that they're completely immoral. Are they currently so exorbitant that it's ridiculous and could be quantified as theft? Absolutely. You can't do a government without any form of money. Voluntary paying the government wouldn't work. You have to be realistic here.
Thank you.
But my main goal with taxes would be heavily reducing.
So you seem a lot more rational. Here's my thing. Anyone who has anarcho something in their name or in their bio on any social media app, I can't take any of them seriously. Yes, taxes should exist. Romans makes a pretty good case for that, and so does living in society ever. I would say makes a pretty good case for that. Except obviously, and this is where again, there's a lot of stuff that we're going to agree on, and this is where paleo conservatives get the bad rap. This is where I see a lot of the straw man arguments coming from. Y'all want a big government. Y'all think big government is good. truly, if we took power, the size of the government would drastically increase. Okay, we agree. Oh, sorry, decrease. My bad.
That is true. Actually, the term paleoconservative refers to the pre-World War II American right that formed out of opposition to the New Deal. Like, do people forget that? It's true. It's true. Now, the pre-war right was, more aggressive with things like just faith, social issues, cultural issues, protectionism, isolationism. But don't forget that part of like the roots of paleoconservatism. It actually start like that when we say paleoconservatism, or when people say that, or they use the term old right, the reference is in reference to the the pre-World War II right, or the post-World War I right, you could say. So Warren Harding, Calvin Coolidge, Lindbergh, and kind of the paleocons that the America First Caucus and whatnot, the people who basically formed in opposition to FDR's New Deal. Like that's the pre-war American right. But because they were like, Christian and believed in immigration restrictionism and nationalistic trade policy and foreign policy, they were these big, evil, big government tyrants. Like it's not accurate. But
we agree with abolishing the Fed. We agree with right now we agree with abolishing the FBI. Basically, what we want, and we agree with lower taxes. We agree with
why only right now for the FBI?
Oh, well, I mean, personally, just because right now it's a big deal, and now all Republicans save Dan Crenshaw support, basically getting rid of the FBI. But I mean, no, I'd say paleocons for a long time have been pro get rid of the FBI. They're a tactic used against political opponents, which quite frankly, right now in the immediate future, that might be a necessary tool for conservatives to take back this country. But I wouldn't. Yeah.
Again, true, by the way, and our kind of ideological forefathers, even though they're still alive, but Paul Gottfried, very if you want to talk about the kind of three fathers of like modern paleoconservatism, it's basically like Pat Buchanan, Paul Gottfried, Sam Francis. Both like Gottfried and I believe like Francis too write extensively about managerial tyranny, right? Gottfried had a whole book about it. Francis talked about it a lot too. Paleocons have never really been in big favor of the administrative state in history, or even in like our modern context. It's just important to point out.
I'm not smart enough to lay any of those sorts of plans out right now. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so you guys have debated a lot of these points.
Okay.
But the next one I kind of want to hear Matthew's point on this. What do you believe freedom is, and how do you believe freedom should be used within the government and just in society?
Okay, here we go. Interesting part of the debate. Here we go.
I might need a little clarification on the second part. But freedom is the ability to make your own decisions over your own body. Not to sound like a liberal, because I am anti-abortion. But because, I mean, as a human, you should be able to have the decision making over what you yourself do, as long as you're not harming somebody else. And I mean, I don't need to expound really. What was the second part? How's that used in government? What does that mean? How do you
just in the sense of like, should people have total and complete?
Well, here's the thing. I think the real question is, what is the utility of freedom? Because I think everyone generally agrees, like, I guess the basic definition of freedom would be the ability to like do what you want or what you choose, right? Like that's just kind of like a dictionary definition of freedom. The real question should be, why do we, even as like conservatives, or I guess in this case right wingers, why do or should we value freedom, and of what value, of what utility should we view freedom as being? And I think this is the important distinction, which is that I think a conservative, or I think what should be seen as the truly conservative position, we believe that the utility, the function of freedom, of liberty, is itself fundamentally to basically free man to maximize his potential, right? That is the utility, that is the function, that is kind of the purpose, the reason why we want freedom or like freedom or support freedom, right? The utility of freedom is the freedom. Hold on, I'm timing out Spicy Peach. I'm sorry, very very distracting, very annoying. There, you guys are welcome. You guys are welcome. The function of freedom is the maximization of man's potential. That's why we support freedom. That's why we want to get, for instance, government out of the way of that, out of the way, business, big business or whatever, out of the way of that. It is the maximization of man's potential, not the maximization of man's own self-destruction. That's why we support freedom. So we don't support freedom so that people can go destroy themselves on porn, on consumerism, on drugs, on all that whatever, right? We support freedom because we want people to be able to maximize their own potential, not have a ceiling on that potential, right? And so, for instance, this is why conservatives would support something like deregulation for small business, right? Because you get the government out of the way, this business can thrive, this honest business owner can bring more money home to their family, right? That's another reason we believe in lower taxes, because we want people to be able to have more money, but not more money to like buy OnlyFans. Ideally, we want them to have that money to raise their family and kind of live out their American dream. That's why we support something like low taxes. And that's why ideally I would give out tax credits for people who do have families or get married or all of those things, right? But that's important to understand. That's what we believe the utility of freedom is, right? Because we believe that's noble. We believe that the utility of freedom is that it is a utility to the extent to which it allows people to do better things and to maximize a greater potential of being able to do those things without being impeded. But when it comes to people destroying themselves or ushering in the self-destruction of others, that ultimately is where we draw the line, because we don't believe freedom is useful in that regard, right? Freedom means nothing in itself. It's not useful unless it's being used to, implement or allow virtuous things. So,
freedom. Do you trust people to live freely in their day-to-day lives and not, go shoot up a store or something like?
Well, since I'm not an anarchist, if you shoot up a store, you'd be in prison. Do I trust people to be good? No. But that's why there's a big problem. This is another big problem I have with conservatism. Is I feel like it's in a sense cowardly, because there are societal issues that are problematic that as a libertarian you would let people do those things. But as Christians, we have the Great Commission and we are tasked to witness to everyone. And if we're actually doing that, then these societal issues will get better. There's responsibility on the church, and that should not be taken over by the government.
Do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, to your question, sort of to rebut what Matt has said, like as I said in the beginning, there is no such thing as not affecting another person with anything you do. As I said earlier,
again, I already gave the take on it before, but I explained, like, I don't think the government should be the church. I think the government should strive to create a culture where the gospel and the church thrives, and a culture like we have today is pretty antithetical to that. And government should not want the culture to look like that. People, libertarians, will say, well, how do you control that? You can do it pretty easily, actually, because the culture we have today is the result of left-wing political policies over the course of several decades. Okay, they're not separated from each other. They're actually very united with each other. That's how liberals got to the point they are today. So,
the way you behave in private is inevitably going to affect the way you behave in public. And the moral foundations of my society are very much, my business.
True.
If there are people selling drugs in my neighborhood, if there are people selling their bodies in my neighborhood, that affects me. Whether they're attacking me physically or not, that still affects me, and that affects my children. You know, that affects what my children are being exposed to out in public. There need to be regulations on how people can behave. We should not allow people to walk around naked. Okay, I don't know if you would support that or not, but people should not be allowed to walk around naked. Okay, and this goes into property rights too. Okay, because libertarians do literally anything you want with your own property. And I always bring up, if you have a billboard, somehow you got enough money, you bought a billboard in Times Square, and 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you display hardcore pornography on that billboard. That billboard's your property. Should you have the right to do that?
I would say no, because children would be able to see that.
Why is it just?
I mean, I understand the response, but how is that response actually consistent with the libertarian position? Like, why, like, okay, according to, again, approaching this from a libertarian position, from your point of view, why is it even a bad thing that children see that? Because I thought the only aggression against someone can be like a physical aggression, like the violation of the non-aggression principle. Right? I thought that's what governs your whole idea, or like whole everything. So according to the non-aggression principle, saying things, showing images, whatever, that's just free speech. Only when you threaten someone's life or property is that a violation of non-aggression principle. And besides that, like, morality is basically all subjective. Okay, that's like the view of the non-aggression principle of the libertarians and whatnot. So from his point of view, why should children be protected even like from that? Like, it's not actually consistent. Now, he's thinking with somewhat of a rational, natural instinct. You could argue it's a conservative instinct. Well, of course you shouldn't show children that, which, again, I agree, you shouldn't show children that. And I do think you should listen to your very gut instinct that tells you that. But that gut instinct is not found in the NAP. What's violating the NAP? Showing porn on the Times Square thing if it's your property. What's violating it? It's just images, bro. That's their free speech. I'm just saying. I don't see how that's logically consistent. You know. So
I knew it would come to this. Why is it that children? Why only children?
I'm very authoritarian on protecting children.
Why? Why does it change?
Again,
Because
why? Yeah, it's so true. Why?
Important that they're the weakest among us. They can be so easily taken advantage of, and it's important that they're protected and raised adequately at minimum.
Anyone can be easily taken advantage of. So many people, it's literally, so many people have actual genetic, they have addiction in their genetic code, you know, and some people have much weaker minds than others. Some people are far more immature than other people.
Maybe taking advantage
the age of 18 is
very arbitrary. But in terms of,
it's very true. So first of all, people's brains don't fully develop till 25. So, you know, but they're a child. Well, yeah, I agree. But then why suddenly you can fully take advantage of someone when they're 18, but when they're 17.99 years, suddenly it's okay. You know what I mean? Like, I think people just need to be protected in general. You know, it's very true. And Blake brings up a great point too, like addiction. Like, yeah, if people who have like a long family history of addiction, and some guy like this will say, well, when they're minors, yeah, we should stop it. But the minute they turn 18, they're on their own. Let them destroy themselves. That, hey, they chose to do that. You know, it's like, it's very strange. It's not very, it doesn't actually make a lot of sense.
Maybe taking advantage of was not the best term, but just they're so moldable, and I mean, I don't know all the science behind it, but we have a duty to not let them be abused, and exposing them to pornography would be a form of abuse.
I mean, I'd 100% agree. And, you know, it's biblical too. It's better that a millstone be wrapped around the neck of anyone who offends these younglings. But I don't see why it just stops with them. You know, if something's wrong, it's not only wrong because it's committed against a child. It's wrong in general. It's made worse by the fact that this thing is committed against a child.
Absolutely.
In general.
Because
this is something that applies to liberals a lot too. Because you have some liberals who will say, well, I agree, don't show that stuff to children, but think it's perfectly fine otherwise. Well, you not wanting, like, here's the thing, if it's perfectly acceptable If there's nothing wrong with it, if there's nothing wrong with sexuality, whatever, shout your abortion, shout your gender, sex change, whatever, come out of the closet. You know, if there, because there's nothing wrong with it morally or psychologically or whatever, then like, why is it not okay to show to children? Like, does the logic apply there? Like, why? You know what I mean? And it's so true. It's not okay to show to children. If something is not okay to show to children, then it's probably because there actually is something wrong with it. And like Blake says, it's just amplified by the fact that it's worse because you're showing it to children who are, young, innocent, more easily manipulated. Right.
Everyone, as we all agreed on before, everyone is fallen. Everyone has a sinful nature. For our society to promote and propagate a sinful nature and encourage people to sin, which is something, and this is going to be a hot take, that inevitably occurs with capitalism.
True.
Because capitalism will, I believe, it necessitates appealing to people's innate desires and their carnal lusts to profit. I think that this will always happen, and we're seeing this happen in society right now. Porn is being...
It's very true.
It's being allowed to be viewed by children, and quite frankly, I'd say that a lot of these porn websites are paying advertisers to distribute their pornography to children.
Why do you think that's controversial? It's more capital.
All right, I'll let the debate continue for a second.
It's driven by profits.
Yeah.
Now the market can shape that to make people do good things.
It won't.
Shop at a given store, but that is how capitalism works.
It literally won't. It won't do that. And Blake is right. Unrestricted free market capitalism will always drive toward. So let's take both things at the same time. They're both true. The drive for profit, as the libertarian guy says, inevitably drives towards the drive for vice that Blake says, right? Because, if you're trying to profit as much as possible, we could talk about drugs or whatever, but look at something like, I don't know, let's just say your cell phone or whatever, you know what I mean? Social media, whatever it is, right? Products of capitalism or whatever. So the biggest profit motive, what would drive the most profit, is basically getting you addicted to whatever product that they sell, right? And this is why, unrestricted free market capitalism will always drive toward a bunch of like mega corporations that basically are trying to maximize people's self-destruction, right? Because the way to make the most profit is to make people addicted to their phone so that they can't live without it. If you're a social media provider, the way you make the most profit is by keeping your people on, keeping your users on that social media site for as many hours out of the day as you can. So naturally, and this is not just true of tech things, it's true of everything, food, like literally anything you sell. So like the whole profit motive will never engineer towards like a moral stoic sense of like moderation and reasonable consumption, right? And safe consumption and healthy things. You know what I mean? The drive for profit will always try to get people addicted and hooked on things as much as possible. Not just like drugs, things like their phone, things like, just the consumerist culture in general, right? That benefits profit, that maximizes profit. Consumerism maximizes profits. Getting people to buy as much stuff as possible, even when it's not good for them, will maximize profit, right? And then on the other hand, you want to talk about like stuff like the food system or whatever, like you look at like the cancerous stuff that is just full in our food system, like it's everywhere. You can't get around it, if you're trying to make profit, if you're trying to profit as much as possible, then you're going to cut as many corners as possible, right? You're going to use the cheapest ingredients. You're going to use the most preservatives, the longest lasting ingredients, you know what I mean? All that stuff, instead of doing what's actually healthy for people. And that's not just something that applies to the food system. That's something that applies to everyone. So, gambling, all this stuff.
So this leads in pretty well into the next question, but really quick, If you guys are watching the live stream right now, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the KGB
Keep
show.
sending in questions.
Also, yeah, keep sending in questions and join our Patreon and/or hey, shut up, man. All right, and/or join
I am a
our
dad at a
panel
cookout.
member,
Where you can literally.
I am a dad at a cookout.
$8
Real.
You can get our exclusive emojis in chat. You get exclusive content, or you get early access to our content, and you get your name at the end of videos. Now, my question is, what are your thoughts? And I think we're going to start with Matthew.
It's real. By the way, guys, send in super chats if you want to break up like the stream a little bit. I don't know.
Because he was last off. What are your thoughts?
I don't think
on
we got a
free
lot
market
tonight.
capitalism?
Wow, you guys
Bro.
want me to do the whole debate, and you're not even supporting. Just kidding.
Okay.
It's all good.
Why? So give me your thoughts on like it and what you believe that free market capitalism entails.
So I guess should clarify a few aspects. Like if a corporation is dumping pesticides into a lake, that would be a violation of someone else's property. That would be like a technical restriction.
But if they own that lake, is it okay?
The reason I would say no is because it inevitably is going to run downstream somewhere else. It's a little more complicated when you get into that. But pro because if people sign contracts with consenting adults, they should be allowed to do that type of stuff.
All right, Blake, thoughts?
I am pro free markets to an extent.
So
I
not free markets.
probably might not say I'm pro capitalism, but capital.
Well, I mean, I think here's the difference between like real conservatives and like the lolberts, the hyper capitalists, whatever. I see market economies as a utility, right? I think that in terms of property distribution, in terms of goods and services, things work the most efficiently and are allocated the best. Resources are allocated the best when they operate by market principles. That's my only thing about really capitalism and free markets. Like I don't view it, and this is the difference. So I view it as like this utility, as this like economic system. It's really not like morally good or bad in a sense, just like, oh, well, it just works the best, it's the most efficient. The libertarians and whatnot, they view capitalism as some type of like moral system, hence why they're so, stuck to it. They're so fixated on it. They're so, loyal and borderline worshiping of this concept, this idol of capitalism, is just precisely because, they view it as this moral thing. Like, oh, well, capitalism is, they say this all, capitalism is the most moral system made to man because this, and that, and property rights. And so to them, it's like, if you violate the concept of capitalism, you're doing something immoral. Whereas for us, restricting the market in certain ways that just are necessary, it's just like, oh, well, we're just doing what's right. It's not a god. Capitalism's not a god to be worshipped. It's just like a system that is used to like function things properly or whatever, right? So it's so true. Based $1 super chat from Lionos. We're balling now. I'm ready to retire. Let's go.
Capitalism in and of itself is a socialist term. I mean, could we agree on that?
What's your basis for that?
Well, I mean the term capitalism essentially came from Karl Marx, right?
Okay.
But it's basically talking about free markets. Free markets to an extent. I think people trading with each other, goods and services, supply and demand, it's all good. I don't talk about economics very much. However, markets always need to be regulated, okay? Because as I stated earlier, capitalists will always inherently market towards people's innate carnal desires and cause them to destroy themselves. You see this with pornography.
I'm plugging my phone.
You see this with the type of food that we eat. Okay, we got to market
Real.
what's being put in our food and what's being put in our products. They're putting babies are born with microplastics inside of them. What's going on there? All right, that's not good. That's not good for anybody. That baby didn't choose to have all those microplastics ingested. No, that's something that they're born with now because of what people are being sold, what people are being marketed, and people are not. Here's the biggest problem with capitalism.
Oh, so what's up, KGB show, by the way? Everyone be sure to go subscribe. Oh, so, people just need to do their own research, right? All the masses need to do their own research and figure out that seed oils are bad and then figure out a whole shopping plan a very esoteric shopping plan where, you know, they have to mostly buy food off of like weird websites instead of just going to the grocery store. But that's how we stop, you know, mass seed oils and fertility problems in society. Real. Of course, he believes that. Very.
From people are not
It's very
intelligent enough.
cringe.
They lack the agency to make informed decisions about their lifestyle. You know, that people are very susceptible to marketing and to emotional marketing or whatever.
Well, clearly the FDA, USDA, etc. aren't working. So what would be your alternative to fix that problem?
Put better people in charge. This always has to be the case.
Here's my issue with that, and it kind of stems to the whole thing with conservatism, is that there's such a reliance on putting the best Christian good people in charge, and even like King David fell. Like, you can't. It's kind of a form of idolatry where you're just like putting these people on a pedestal saying they'll save us.
Okay, hold on. Again, that's any governmental system. Okay. That's like the reality of the situation, because societies are societies and governments are governments. Like, regardless of what the Constitution says, you know, ultimately you're going to get the best results when the best people are in power, and you get the worst results when the worst people are in power. And it doesn't matter what your Constitution or whatever says. And like, you know, I'm going to bring this up again. America itself is a prime example of why that principle still applies. Because I thought the Constitution was this perfect document where the founders just got it right on how to restrict tyrants from using power or whatever. But then it's like, okay, but explain modern America then. What happened to America? The same thing that happens to like any civilization when it falls. It starts off at its peak and it reaches its peak with very good leaders and very good elites. And because, you know, the fallen state of man, those elites just get worse and worse over time, the society degrades. This happened in America. It happened in Rome. It happened in the Ottoman Empire. It happened like every 100 years in China. Like, it happens this is just how it works. This is how it goes. And the same is true of libertarians too. Because again, if America supposedly, according to them, was founded as some libertarian paradise, then what happened? What happened? Why is it in the state that it is today? For the same reason that it happens with every other civilization, by this logic, because that's just what happens. When the quality of leadership declines, which if any civilization lasts hundreds of years, thousands of years, inevitably is going to happen because of the fallen state of man, then you'll just get to a state where things aren't as good. And because of bad leadership. It's very true. So,
and no human is able to do that.
I don't understand. Again, this is what I said at the beginning. I don't understand how anything libertarians say will ever get accomplished without doing the same thing. And unless you're going to talk about revolting, but I don't see that happening.
But isn't it a form of idolatry to look towards them?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, look, I'm not happy with. I'm not a big fan of democracy myself. However, I don't think it's idolatry to say, okay, we live in a representative republic. Okay, we elect people to get things done that we want to get done. Let's elect people who think very well. They're Christian. They make good decisions, and they'll make good decisions when they're in government. I think that's very basic. I think that's how I think that's how 99% of Americans think about politics.
Just history's not on your side on that, but.
Should we move on to the next question?
I wasn't listening. What did he say? History's not on the side of?
The thing with conservatism is that there's such a
Hold on.
where you.
I don't understand. Again, this is what I said at the beginning. I don't understand how anything libertarians say will ever get accomplished without doing the same thing.
True.
And unless you're going to talk about revolting, but I don't see that happening.
But isn't it a form of idolatry to look towards them?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, look, I'm not happy with. I'm not a big fan of democracy myself. However, I don't think it's
having kings and leaders is not idolatry. If it were, then the Bible, considering Israel and like everything around Israel, was governed by monarchy basically. You probably, if it were apparently anti-biblical to just have like kings and leaders, then you think the Bible would kind of say that instead of basically directly endorse hierarchies and monarchies and whatnot. So,
republic. Okay, we elect people to get things done that we want to get done. Let's elect people who think very well. They're Christian. They make good decisions, and they'll make good decisions when they're in government. I think that's very basic. I think that's how 99% of Americans think about politics.
Just history's not on your side on that, but
Should we move on?
History's not on his side. That's literally how every civilization in history has risen and fallen. It's risen and reached its height because of good leaders, and it's fallen because of bad leaders. Okay? Even if America is supposedly the greatest exercise in classical liberalism in human history, which I disagree with, but the people like this probably would say is true, then what happened to America, dude? Same thing that happened to like the Roman Empire. Like, you know what I mean? That's just how society works. What does he mean history? What does he mean history's not on our side? That's literally like the arc of every civilization in history. And like, yes, any political philosophy for it to work is going to take people who are smart and good leaders and elite and talented to put it into implementation. Like, there's literally not one example to the contrary, including libertarianism, which by the way has never had a successful society in history. Shall we point that out? What is it? What is like the model success of like libertarianism in history? Like, I don't even know what it is. I don't know. I know some people point to like 9th century Ireland or something. That's like the response I've gotten from some libertarians back in like 2018 or something. But I don't know what they're at now. I don't know. Is it Somalia? Like, what actually is it? But, you know.
This one's coming in from Blah Blue. He says,
what a king.
Should
Our
the
guy.
Supreme
Blob
Court
Blue.
overturn gay marriage? Ooh, who wants to lead?
you go first this time.
Absolutely. Gay marriage is one of the worst atrocities that's ever faced this country. Unironically. I mean, everyone's against what's going on right now with kids being transitioned. That's a direct result of gay marriage being legalized. This is the slippery slope. And, I truly think that the slippery slope only goes one way. I think it only goes to the left.
It's true.
Really good,
as we talked about earlier.
I forget the name of. You may have heard this. I'm not sure. But any institution that is not explicitly right-wing will inevitably become left-wing over time. Have you heard that before?
No, it just makes sense.
But yeah, it makes sense, right? So
Real.
that's my take on gay marriage. Yeah, Supreme Court needs to overturn that immediately.
Matthew?
So the Christian libertarian take on gay marriage, my personal sub it.
All right, here we go.
Gay marriage is an oxymoron. The actual definition of marriage, as originally prescribed, is a covenant between God, a man, and a woman. So it can't be gay marriage. And then ultimately, marriage should not be based off of that definition. It should have no aspect of the government involved. The government giving you a paper that says you're married to someone is making marriage with them according to God. So they should just stay completely out of it.
Yeah,
This is not just a Christian libertarian take. I hear a lot of conservatives give this take to like circumvent or be able to fence it on the marriage question. And it really just makes no sense. It doesn't make any sense. How like, functionally speaking in society, yes, marriage is a covenant between a man, a woman, and God. That's true. But it's also a covenant that has societal implications and political implications, right? Now, this isn't, I'm going to use this as an example. It's not as true today, but think about like back then. Okay. So oftentimes, especially with like higher classes, marriages weren't just like the union of two people, but it was also really kind of like this. They were arranged marriages, by the way, for the reason like, basically a lot of times you had like two families of like nobility, basically their children getting married. And that's kind of like the way to, like I said, like I'm trying to get at, it had like political ramifications, right? Of these two families having their son and daughter marry, whatever. And Epic Ape for the $5. Thank you very much. He says, KGB show you and Doyle got me out of my libertarian phase last December. We appreciate it. We appreciate it. Thank you for the support. And glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. From Epic Ape. Look at that profile picture. I think he's a very epic ape, truly. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for the support. Glad to hear it. But still, even today, marriage is something that has legal and political ramifications. Maybe it's not as dramatic as like back in the day when these two classes of nobility like come together and they share the estate or whatever it is, right? But even so, you think about things like property ownership, right? And by the way, I still think there's some degree of significance there. There are still examples where there are like real ramifications, politically speaking and legally speaking, to marriage. But you consider questions like property ownership, taxes, custody of children, right? Custody of children, rights, and all that stuff on that front, right? Like, functionally speaking, you can't even, like, I don't know, changing your name. You have to change your name through the government or whatever. Like, it's a process that naturally has to go through the government. You see what I'm saying? The government has to be involved in marriage because it's basically doesn't make societal logistical sense not for it to be. Because there's so many ramifications, like I keep saying, that are going to have these political and legal effects, right? Property ownership being a big part, you know, custody of children being another one. This whole take that like government shouldn't recognize marriage at all or shouldn't be involved in marriage, it doesn't make any sense. Nobody even thinks about this logic. Like, it makes no sense. It makes no sense at all. And throughout all of history, government, even if it wasn't even if it wasn't the federal government or the king or whatever, even if it was like the local town community, that government, the local government, you could say, still, marriage has always been something that has been recognized and, you know, reflected by the government. Why? Because you can't really function society without it. Estate ownership, children, all this stuff. It's an inherently socially impactful institution. Okay. Augustus GB for the $2. Thank you very much. He says, 21st century women marry themselves. It's so true. It's so true. Yeah. Real. That should be made illegal too. But divorce definitely has legal ramifications, especially economically. And that's also true. That's also true. But, they'll say like, oh, well, divorce, what the church is just going to figure out how to do like the legal split of property in a divorce. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Nobody thinks it through. It's just a cope. And people think they're based for saying it too. They think they're based because it's like, oh, well, I'm deferring to the church, not the government. It's right wing. No, it's not. It doesn't make it. Hey, do you think about this position at all? How are you going to have a society where government doesn't recognize any form of marriage at all? How are questions like this going to be resolved? Like, it doesn't make any sense. How's the legal system even going to work on this front? Like I said, it makes no sense. It's a pseudo-intellectual take. It's not logical. It's not rational. There's no. It's just a cope. I don't know what it is. Like, it's a made up position. It's not a serious political position. Because if you thought about this for 2 seconds, you'd be like, well, how is that going to work? How is all this stuff going to, like, how is government not going to recognize marriage at all? Government has to recognize marriage. Like, it's not possible to have a society where government doesn't, because it has governmental implications,
Disagree with that. I think the government has a pretty big role in promoting families. I think marriage is very important because it's not just, two people who love each other. They want to get.
I mean, that's true. Like, government should, promote family and all that stuff. But I don't even think that's the fundamental reason why government should recognize marriage. I think government should recognize marriage on like a more basic level, not even like this forward thinking, because it should incentivize this. It's literally because like the functioning of society doesn't make sense without government recognizing marriage. Because like I said, how do you tackle issues like property ownership, name recognition, custody of children and the rights of parents and children, all this stuff? Well, who's the legal custody of the child? It doesn't make any sense if you don't have government recognizing marriage, right? So
they want to be together. They want to live together. Yeah, anyone can do that. But no, it's very important because that's the ideal.
It's true. And no, literally, it's like the church saying, let the church recognize what's a murder or not. Exactly. It's like something fundamental that society needs to turn in circles. And, you're saying you're going to just not have government involved in it,
Man and a woman, that's the ideal
very true
situation for children to grow up in. And I think the government, should definitely encourage that among its citizens, whether it be with, tax credits or whatever. I'm not really sure how marriage works, especially not in the state of Texas, but what sort of benefits come with marriage in terms of tax breaks. But incentivizing marriage, I think, is a very good thing. On top of that, incentivizing childbirth is a very good thing. We got to get our birth rate back up. We got to get people born again. Not in the metaphysical sense, but just born, literally, just born in general. Not
there's big debate going on in chat right now.
Yeah, there are debates going on.
Yeah, so I'm thinking we ask them.
Well, I was gonna say, do something of a proposal, right? Taking from what I see in chat, I'm gonna give you guys a statement. Tell me why you agree, or if you agree or disagree, and then why, right? America is the greatest country in the history of the world. Matt, agree, disagree, why?
Disagree. Israel, when God ran it, the best one.
Okay. Blake?
I'm going to disagree as well. I don't have any. I can't think of any alternative. I mean, that's a pretty good answer. I don't want to just copy his answer.
But the main thing,
definitely no.
The main thing in chat was America is the greatest country because it was built on democracy.
Yeah, no, I'll disagree.
So, my next question.
Real. I don't really have much to say to that. It's true.
To you guys, what would your guys' ideal form of?
Is that a good or a bad take? I honestly, it's never something I've really thought about because I don't think it matters. It doesn't matter if America is the best country in the world currently or historically. We are here. This is the land that God has placed us. Therefore, I don't even ponder these questions. I just see it as my duty to make it better and want to restore it or whatever. But to really answer that question, I don't know. Like he said, I think ancient pre-New Testament Israel could make a case. The Eastern Roman Empire, I don't know, but like I really like I don't really care. Like I don't think it's a relevant question. Is America the best country in the world today? I guess maybe still, I don't know. You think about the other alternatives, you could make some case maybe you'd rather live in, but I don't ask these questions to myself really because I don't really spend my time wishing that I lived in this other country or even wishing that I lived in this different point in history. Like I accept that this is where God placed me and God placed all of us. Therefore, I don't even think about, oh, well, I wish I was here. I wish I was there. I'm be honest. If I were to be honest, I'd rather not be at any place in history than right now. Not because of the luxuries I have, but really because of the task we have and the chance to be great that we have. You know what I mean? Like we're being placed in this moment where this historically great civilization is being trampled on, and we're in this serious period of tribulation or whatever. But I think that, I don't know, as a man, I see that as our opportunity to rise to greatness. You know what I mean? To rise to greatness, to rise to glory, to pass the test, you could say. And what man doesn't, romanticize that concept? And it's just very true. Anyways, Andrew M says America started going downhill when Christianity and church attendance declined. The new atheists have sowed the seed for all this cultural decay. It's so true. It's so true. It's no accident. It's very obvious. I don't have much to say to that, honestly, Andrew. I think we agree. I think the whole chat agrees. But thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate it. And it's so true.
Of government be.
Start off with Matt. Yeah, or do you want to start?
Yeah, who started last time? I think it was Matt.
You did. So
I really hate talking about idealism, which is another reason I dislike.
I know this is like a Facebook post here catchphrase, but it's just so true. Don't pray for better times. Pray to be stronger men. And that's the way I view our position, really, and why we're here and why God has placed us here. You know what I mean? And so, I really don't spend time. Yeah, I'll be honest. I've watched little Dark Age edits of like the Eastern Roman Empire before. Okay, I have. But I don't spend time being like, I wish I was there. I wish I was in the 1950s or whatever. No, I'm glad I'm here. And, I see it as like my duty and my chance to be great and to do something great, not like, so it's true.
Another
I don't
reason
think
I
I'd rather
dislike
live at a
it-
different time in history.
Yeah. Another reason I dislike the concept
You know?
of libertarianism. I hate idealism. So I hate even thinking. I think about what we have right now, what the tools are that we have to play with and to deal with. Oh man! But if I had to say, gosh, monarchy's pretty cool.
That's what some people are.
No, the czar. Okay, we need a czar. We need a czar. We need a czar. Unironically, no, that's good. That's a good answer.
My ideal political system is a republic where only people I personally approve get to vote and get to run for office. And then, that's where you get the kind of clash of ideals where we can have like the Hegelian dialectics where we present the best solution, right? Because it's like, I think, like my view is like, I think I'm pretty smart. I think I get it, but I don't think I'm the smartest guy. I don't think I know everything. So what I do is I take people who I approve of and who mostly agree with me on everything, but you make them vote and you make them the people only who get to run for office. And then through that genuine sense, though, of competition in the republic and whatnot, fighting for ideas, arguing over the ideas, again, only among people that we agree with on like 90% of things, then you can create the best result and like the best stuff for the country, because you just get the best and the brightest and the most correct people working these issues out in a reasoned manner with one another. This is so true. This is so true. Like, this is what we need. This is what we need. Okay. And in my opinion, that's actually I know it's a total LARP because it would never happen. But if you'd ask me what's the ideal political system, I'd argue that's actually more ideal than a monarchy, right? Because if all of us are imperfect, then what you do is you take the most perfect people, closest to perfect people, I should say, who are obviously still far from perfect, but then you let them kind of figure things out together, and you basically have like this oligarchy. It's basically like the Roman Republic, but it's like more selective. And that's what I would do. Like, that's what I would do. That's the way to do it. That's literally the ideal political system. It's just so true.
To be fair, full office, the Kingdom of Israel.
It's a consulship. Yes. Yes. We need a consulship.
That said, when God ran it, to be fair.
Yes. But for me, I'd say, yeah, a democracy to an extent. But would there be more requirements to vote than simply being born here? Not a bad idea. I'm not gonna hard commit on that.
That's a very
online, but
no, that's a very good segue. That's a very good segue. So, seeing as we live in a constitutional republic, but a democracy type society government, what would your guys' restrictions on voting be for a president? And that,
Oh, I'm so happy to talk about
you
this.
could give as many as you'd like, as little as you'd like. You can, elaborate super far and deep. If you don't want to elaborate too much, you can just, give like a couple typical answers, like here's some requirements you need. But start off with Matt, since Blake started the last one.
It's definitely a right, not a privilege. There are some things that I will throw out as possible good ideas.
Okay.
Property owners would be a good one. Also,
what is this? Who should vote?
Is really iffy.
Yeah, property owning heads of households. That my thing was like 3 generations. That was my lineage requirement. But yeah,
the government could twist it and use it for evil, but
In
passing some.
and you should have at least
to
one
test,
child. That's what I would say.
Even if you were born here.
Okay.
Could be good.
So, like, you got to know your history.
I like
Yeah.
that. No,
at least
that's real.
at least understand how your government works if you're going to vote for it.
That's real.
Is that it?
You know,
I mean, top 2.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
when I think about a test like that, like you said,
I think it's a privilege.
This is where I agree with you. The government can twist it in any weird way.
Wait, did he? Yeah, he did, huh? He said voting is a right, not a privilege. I believe he said that. Yeah, voting's not a right. It's not a right. You're not. It's just. It's not. It's not a right. That's all I have to say.
People could lie on it. You know, this is when people say like, "Oh, when people immigrate here, they should answer questions to see like how pro-America they really are." They'll just lie. They'll just lie.
Well, it would be like a fact-based one. Do you know the facts or not?
Okay, yeah, in the voting case.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So my restrictions on voting, and I think I have the best take ever on this. Okay, this is where I'm going to go full Andrew Tate. I am the smartest person on this possible topic. To vote in this country, you need to have a vested interest in both the future and the past of this country. Therefore, you must have been born here, your parents must have been born here, and you have to have children. This is my case.
So
and property owner.
This is my case. You have.
I like that system a lot, actually. Like I said, my kind of proposal, I went a little bit further, but I think that's a very easy way and a good way to rationalize it too. You know, I like it. You have to have stake in the past and stake in the future. Hence, parents born here, kid, at least one kid. That's very good. Very good. Very good take.
Respect for the past. Property owner. Yeah, I don't know if that's like inherent.
So true. One vote per household. So true.
I don't know.
I kind of like that because it's like
Brandon Allen. Let's pause a little bit because we are in like the Q&A hour. He says is writing a Christian essay to Christian colleges a good idea? I'll be honest. I don't think I really applied to any Christian colleges when I was doing the application process. Let me think, because I know I was gonna apply to Notre Dame, but I ended up not because let's just say in January there was a peaceful political event in DC that I wanted to attend, and the application process, like the apps were all due like around that day, and I never finished the Notre Dame one. So I really can't say I and that's the only like Christian school I applied to, I believe. So I really couldn't tell you. But and I think it also depends on, is it actually a Christian school? Like I guess I applied to Georgetown and got in, but that's not a Christian school just because it's a Jesuit school or whatever. But so I don't know what it's like on the application front. What I will say is that I think if you're doing this from a principled standpoint, if I think it's actually a good way to tell if it's like an authentic Christian school, right? Because if the school is going to think that's dumb or like reject your authentic faith, which I'm sure there are plenty of Christian schools, quote unquote, out there that will, then I don't think there's a school you want to go to. So I would say that it is a good idea from a principled standpoint. In terms of getting in, I don't know. You'd probably be better off playing it safe, but I think if you're going to take this, yeah, well, you sound like you're going to take this from a principled standpoint, which I would suggest you to do, because you don't want to be going to a school that basically scammed you into going there thinking it was a Christian school. So I would say, yeah, then I would say definitely do that.
No, I like it too. I definitely like it too, and because that's how it was in the founding of America, because only property owners paid taxes. But that one's kind of iffy. I don't know. It would depend on what kind of society is running at that point, because like I don't think.
What if only non-property owners pay taxes? That's a great idea.
That's kind of sick. Hold on, I want to elaborate more. You have to have respect and care for the past of this country. Therefore, your parents had to have been born here. And you have to be very concerned about the future and about what sort of society you're going to be leaving behind. You can't live in the immediate present. You have to have a kid.
Have to live the future.
Clarify something real quick. You said a couple hard things like the parents and the kids, but then you also said some vague things like a vested interest. Is it only the hard things that you are requiring, and that they mean those?
Oh
yes.
No, yeah, like having a vested interest in the past and future of society is something that would come with having parents who were born here and kids here. Yeah, that's what I mean by that. You can't, like I said, you can't have someone take a test. Do you have a vested interest in this country? Yeah, like no one's gonna say no.
All right, so really quick, Sir Volkerstein asks, is a monarchy another form of authoritarianism? I'd say yes, but you could have like a more hands-off type of noble king or noble leader, noble queen, whatever.
Or something like England, just kind of
yeah.
a monarchy, kind of a parliamentary.
It's very iffy. I mean, if it like, I mean, I guess like a strict monarchy has never, you know.
Okay, like I don't think we should go around calling ourselves authoritarian. Like that's just not smart. But like principally speaking, like why is authoritarianism quote unquote a bad thing? Like all that basically means is that like the government has a greater role in certain aspects of stuff, which you could almost argue the system we want is less authoritarian because we do want to cut back on a lot of bureaucracy and random nonsense. Really simplify. I think a lot of us agree we ideally would like to simplify the legal code by a lot. So you could actually argue it's actually less authoritarian what we want. But I don't know if they want to call us that or whatever. Like, I don't like what is even like so horrible about the concept of the government just being stronger. Like I don't know.
But like strict forms of government have technically never existed, so it's iffy. Now I have a question for Blake on the. Thanks for the super chat, by the way. Question for Blake on the family stuff. So would you advocate for a family type vote?
Mr. Easy, that's just so true. Like that's such a good take. The same people believe voting is a right by logic would argue the collective votes of Adam, Eve, and the serpent beat the Lord in the Garden of Eden election. It's so true. Oh, but they had the majority opinion. Like God was outnumbered or whatever. It's like, something is not correct, nor is something virtuous simply because a majority votes on it. Things are correct because they're objectively correct and wrong because they're objectively wrong. And if the populace is making wrong decisions, then voting is not even virtuous. Like representative government's not virtuous. It'd be more virtuous. It is more virtuous to have a literal dictator who's doing the right thing than to have a democracy where people keep voting for the wrong thing. Okay. Because there's literally nothing inherently virtuous about representative government or democracy or even republicanism. Right. I think that virtue is something that is created and can grow out of systems and countries and governments based on the decisions that the people make within that governmental system. But I don't think any governmental system, regardless of what it is inherently virtuous at all. Now, there's some that just by nature are unvirtuous, but still, I don't think any of them naturally are virtuous. It's about the decisions those people make. And, but I don't think that, like it's inherently just better because people have representation. If they're making wrong decisions, which most majority populaces will, that's not virtuous.
Or the more children you have, the more your vote matters? Or is this strictly based off, I have one kid, my vote counts as much as I have 3 or 4?
Can I add on to the question?
Yeah, you can add on. As well.
Are you also in favor of like one family vote, like each family gets one singular vote?
Okay, so these are two very opposing
based. Yes.
Here.
Yeah,
that's a really
one vote per household. Okay, it's like it's kind of trad too. Like every estate gets to vote. Not every person, every estate that gets to vote. You think about the ramifications of that too. Literally, you could make society less hyper individualistic if people and more like family and community oriented. Ultimately, imagine that if like the political democracy, quote unquote, was conducted by household, by community rather than by individual. It's true. Imagine how much like more just conscious of their family and their community and just more naturally like paternalistic and caring and selfless people would be if that were the governmental system that they were kind of raised in. It's so true. Imagine that. Imagine like people had to actually think that through and make decisions from that
really good question. Gabe,
angle.
I've never really thought about it that way.
Yeah, because not to add my 2 cents in, but
one vote per household, and the man of the house is the representative for that vote. Absolutely, male headship is biblical, correct? I don't know, because big conservative family would have the same say as small lib families. Well, that's why I don't know if they're going to suggest it or whatever, but that's why you could do it like one vote per kid. So the more kids you have, the more votes you get.
Again, I hate I hate talking about idealism.
Not
Sorry,
that,
sorry,
not
sorry.
that
No,
my
no,
2
yeah.
cents in.
No, it's
Blake's
fine.
not letting him add his 2 cents, all right?
I was
No 2
just gonna
cents here.
say, you know, like I've thought about this. I've had a lot of conversations with different people on the metrics of voting and who should vote, why, what are the requirements for voting, and there is a very different. There is a big difference because you could think about especially in your case, the future of the country, right? You yourself, it is very hard to take care of 7 children as opposed to 3, right? So let's say you have 3, you have less of a vote than the guy that had 7, right? But you have more control on your kids. But if that guy that had 7, he could come out with 7 very great children that produce a bettering in society later on. So it's very iffy on if more kids are better in this sense.
Yeah,
But that's why I asked this question.
I stay like I said.
They are better.
Like I've said a couple times, I like to stay away from ideation and just idealism. But that is a very interesting thought. Just the dad votes and he gets as many votes
Real.
as he has kids. That sounds kind of basic.
It is.
Fine lottery tickets.
I'm not gonna lie. I
But
don't like
what was
that.
your side of the
Making
question?
His question was like a family vote. That's also interesting. Like Gabe just said, if you have more kids, I feel like you're entitled to more of a vote. I don't know. That's very good. That's a good question. That was a really good
I
question.
thought of another one for you.
Okay.
When you talking about voting, you said that parents didn't have to have kids.
GB says, have you heard of the green line test? I always try to remember to stand straight in photos just so people on Twitter can't say that. But if I'm gonna be honest, I don't think it's real. But that said, it does usually work in our favor, so I guess it's fine. But I don't think it's actually a real thing, to be honest.
Be married and have kids.
So, divorce, again, we're talking about idealism. Divorce would be straight up illegal, except no fault divorce would be illegal. Obviously, if there was cheating, if there was violence, if there was misuse of funds or whatever, there are 5.
Who put that into effect?
Thanks, Reagan. There are 5 legitimate reasons, biblical reasons.
I guess.
I forget them
Oh,
all.
my bad. I guess it's true, GB, that usually when you think of a couple picture, a prom picture, a wedding picture, it's always a guy standing straight, girl kind of the one leaned in. But still, it's rather fake, and people don't even use it a lot for relationship photos. They'll just pick random photos of people turn like that and say, "Oh, well, that means simp or whatever." It just, I don't think it's real.
The top of my head, but
Exactly. What if they're both standing straight? What if they're both kind of leaned on each other? Then who's the simp?
That's the way I would see it. So if a man beat his wife,
What if they both cheated on each other? No one gets to
no
vote.
one gets it's all over.
Well, I guess I can actually see its application with couple pictures. Of a couple. I can see that. I can see why it's valid then, because if you're posing with your girlfriend or your wife, there's a certain way you pose as a man, and if you're this to her, then that's inherently that's just inherently feminine and weird and backwards. But people, the way I've seen it applied is literally just any picture where someone is tilted or straight, just not in that context, and it's just fake. It's just people trying to make content or whatever. But I can see it in that context. But I don't usually see it used in that context. They'll just screenshot something random and say, "Hey, look, they're sideways."
Depends who got caught.
It's all.
If they both cheated on each other, children go to the aunt or uncle or something. They now get extra votes.
Yeah.
Oh, let's go.
And mother and father both go to prison. No,
That's
I'm
kind of epic.
kidding.
Siblings turn on each other
All
to get
right,
the kids'
so
votes.
Matthew, I want to ask you a question
What you
because
got?
I sort of have this view on the
Yeah,
world,
I'm gonna-
or I have this view on libertarianism that I've maintained for a long time.
James, want to use some water?
Yeah.
Okay, continue, Mike.
So, if you want a smaller government and you want economic freedom, I do not believe that you can maintain that while also being socially liberal and rejecting any forms of laws based on morality. I believe.
Isn't KGB the Soviet Union org, or am I tripping? Well, it's because their names are Caden. Gabe's on this side, but it's Caden, Gabe, and Blake, and so it's kind of it's a spin on words. It's a pun or whatever.
That if you are going to have this this licentious society where everyone is left to their own devices, people are free to pursue any form of self-destruction that they choose. I believe that these people will. Okay, Caden, can you grab that?
I didn't want to interrupt. Thanks, buddy.
Certain people. This is capitalism. This is a competitive society.
Wait, where did Gabe go?
Other people.
He mysteriously vanished.
Drugs. Other people.
Mysterious, racially ambiguous man vanishes into the night. Oh, my bad.
Do anything. Other people are going to be far less successful. These people inevitably over time will become very fed up with the society that they live in, with this competitive market. And someone is going to come along and say, vote for me, I will give you free shit, basically. Eventually, over time, I believe those people will become the majority. Eventually, you will get this big government that you fear so greatly.
Yeah, it is true. It's true. In any democratic society, especially if you allow people to become hedonistic and, whatever, etc., eventually they're going to, vote for a big government. This is why classical liberalism always descends into liberalism, which descends into leftism, right? It's true.
I think that there's a nice middle ground. As a conservative, I believe that we should be looking out for other members of our society. We should be treating our fellow.
Vince, did you see Ben Shapiro's IG post today? Well, I saw his Twitter thread. I assume they're the same thing. Yeah, Ben is just wrong. I think the core of what he said was like, the less that Republicans mention Trump, the better they do electorally. But that's actually like, yeah, maybe you could have tried to make that argument a few months ago, but I think what you see now is that's clearly not true. Look at the New York special election. Why did we lose that? Because rural turnout was low, not because of suburban turnout, right? Like Ben could arguably make a case of like we had the same suburban problem we had in 2018 or whatever. Like you could arguably make, I'm not saying it's true. You could arguably make that case. The problem right now is rural turnout, okay, which stands to reason that the way that Republicans improve this whole situation is by embracing Trump and embracing the culture war, because turnout and energy in rural America, the heartland, the super deep red places is very low. And so Ben's just wrong. It's just not true. The facts don't care about his feelings because the facts are not on his side. Sorry, Ben, it's true. But he's a very suburban guy. He grew up in like Sherman Oaks, California. He's in like South Florida now. So I get it. He's never experienced like, that part. He thinks as a suburban Republican, but it's like, it's just not true. Because it's empirically false. The problem right now is Republicans aren't energizing the Trump base enough. They're doing well with the suburbs, actually. The urban turnout's their strength right now. They're doing a lot better than they did in like 2018 or whatever. The problem is the Trump people. They're not voting for some reason. You have to get them to vote. So
countrymen as family, rather than being hostile towards other people. I believe that our government has a vested interest in looking out for people. And socialism obviously isn't the answer because it doesn't work. However, putting into place policies that put Americans first, that provide the most opportunity for Americans, I'd say an immigration moratorium. After this talk, I'm gonna have to ask you your opinion on immigration. But an immigration moratorium, I believe in. I'm very protectionist in trade. Trade policy that puts the American people first, doesn't let jobs go overseas, and the immigration not letting jobs being taken away from people here at home. So yeah, I don't believe that libertarianism. I believe that it breeds the mentality of a leftist by being socially liberal. I believe that it will inevitably do that, and I don't believe that it offers adequate response to people who will seek Marxism.
Real.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Okay.
I don't agree, but
Okay. So why don't you agree?
Because it's a two-pronged thing for me, because there's the role of the government and there's the role of the church. And if the church is doing their duty and the God's people are fulfilling the Great Commission, then society will still have those people that reject God and go over to their sin. But as a whole, society would be doing pretty good.
Liberalism destroyed the church.
So true.
liberalism,
And
libertarian.
liberalism and libertarianism. This is where we're going to have this.
I know the words sound similar, but
No, they are the exact same thing, and they stem from all the same beliefs.
So true. What we today called liberalism, libertarianism, I should say. What we today refer to as libertarianism is classical liberalism. Okay. Was referred to as classical liberalism back in its day. Some libertarians still call themselves classical liberals. Classical liberalism foundationally grows out of Locke and many others. It grew out of the Enlightenment, which in itself, like the literal purpose of the Enlightenment, was a rebellion against Christianity and the Christian order that had dominated Europe since the fall of Rome, basically. And so, so that's important to understand. Like, yes, literally, it is true. Libertarianism or liberalism, same thing, from their beginning, destroyed the church. But I think the correct take on it, in the way to understand why classical liberalism and leftism actually work in tandem with each other, is because I think, libertarians, of course, as they still do today, even though it's clearly wrong, understand the world through this whole lens of just like individualism and collectivism, right? That's everything to them. But I think the truth is, the proper understanding of it is that the goal of liberalism, of classical liberalism, especially of original liberalism, was to liberate the individual from the restraints of not even really collectivism, but I guess what you could refer to as traditional collectivism. I don't think it's the best word for it, but just to help you understand, we'll call it traditional collectivism for the sake of it. And so that was essentially the loyalty that, most Europeans felt to things like God, to their family, to their church, to their country, right? You could refer to their communities. You could refer to that as a degree of traditional collectivism. I don't like the word, but let's just functionally speaking use that. The goal of liberalism, of Enlightenment era liberalism, was to liberate the individual from these traditional restraints. It was a rebellion against the church and the family, most fundamentally, is really what it was. The churches, families, monarchies. That's really what, the goal of it was. Okay. I know they weren't as aggressive as in the anti-family thing, but I think the ramifications are clear. Now, with that said, now that the individual was liberated from the traditional constructs of society via the Enlightenment, via classical liberalism, that allowed leftism to come in. And now that people have been liberated from their original restraints, similar to the slippery slope of dual-sided mountain analogy we used earlier, now that void allowed, and you could argue was always designed. Karl Marx himself basically thought that he was just finishing what the Enlightenment liberalism started. Okay, like Karl Marx himself, basically saw himself like that, and it's true, because the goal of leftism now is to take those liberated individuals and now give them a new loyalty, and that is loyalty to leftist collectivism, right? To the leftist ideology, to the state, to the regime, to the leftist cause, to the revolution, right? So that's really, I would argue, like these stages of Enlightenment liberalism. That's why liberalism always descends into leftism, classical liberalism included, right? And so Blake is correct. The ideas do come from the same place, and really, what I would argue is the liberation, quote unquote, or the destruction of traditional order and traditional constraints and hierarchy are foundational to both classical liberalism and leftism, important to understand. And then you can also see the relationship between the two. Like one was literally made to set up the other. So,
John Locke earlier, liberal, believed in the blank slate theory. Liberal. Liberalism as can be defined as the liberation
Right,
of the
true.
individual from all restraints, societal, cultural, governmental.
That's not what modern liberalism is, though.
Sure, but modern liberalism is what original liberalism will always inevitably devolve into.
Can
was designed to devolve into. I would almost make the argument, but it's true.
can bad things derive from good things? Yes.
Yeah.
So
Leftism is the result of liberalism. Liberalism failed immensely, and we're seeing the results of that right now. And liberalism and libertarianism are.
I mean, the second law of thermodynamics is literally that without an outside force, things deteriorate. It's sure something bad came out of something good, but if we go back to the original good.
Okay, so you have to prove to me that if we just returned to X point in history and did things a little bit differently, that everything's going to be okay. That it wouldn't just evolve into what it is right now.
I can't prove definitively that it would.
Hey, wait a minute! I thought that libertarianism did a perfect job of not allowing things to devolve into being wrong. So why did classical liberal America go wrong?
Be fine. But what I can do is look at all of history and all governments that have all been corrupted and been restricting the freedoms of its individual citizens, of the citizenry, and be like, we should try something else.
So, question for both of you, if you guys don't mind me interjecting. Do you agree with this statement? People over 100 years ago plus were more moral than people now.
Sorry, say that one more time. I was reading chat.
People
Real.
100 years ago or more, further than 100 years ago, were more moral than people now.
Yeah.
I mean, church attendance is way up.
Yeah, definitely.
But like moral in the sense they're still fallen.
I mean, moral is hard to quantify, but I just think there's so much more access to sin now that probably.
Oh, really? Whose fault is that? Whose fault is that?
I don't know.
And I believe the government should limit that access.
It's so true.
We missed a super chat from
Oh,
Sir
yeah.
Volkerstein.
Oh, man,
Russia
that guy is rolling.
Russia just passed a law that gives 1 million rubles
I
a
saw
year
that.
to families.
Look at this, guys. My phone is recommending me. You know how it does this thing on the side of the screen? That's me and Papa John. Real. I don't know if I ever posted that. Rare photo of VinceDao and Papa John. It's so true.
With more than 10 children.
Yeah, that's
Thoughts
so
on
epic.
this?
That's so big.
What's that worth in U.S. dollars?
I have no idea, but it's
Ooh,
got to be a lot.
rubles
It's got-
to U.S.
It's
dollars.
got to be a good
How
amount.
much is 1 million rubles?
Oh my gosh, it's like a cent.
I want to end this stream before an unreasonable time because it is a Monday. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Let's see.
We learned about Matt's immigration take. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, join our Patreon, become a channel member where for only $8 a month, you get early access to our content.
Real.
Yeah, in your ideal libertarian society, how the hell is there border security? That's part of taxes. That's part of these little minimalist taxes that we pay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. See. What I see from that is what we're seeing right now, which is the left of your ideal society, which is still going to exist because it always will, importing millions and millions of votes and then crushing the libertarian society to a pulp.
True.
Coming back
Well,
to
if
more
they-
idealist views, right? That money is already being taken out of our pockets. Do you prefer it to go to a foreign nation, or do you prefer it to go back into the pockets of good citizens?
Alive. People are entitled.
I'm trying to see if there's anything.
You said life, liberty, and property.
Like,
This woman
cool.
should have the liberty to give her uterus to whoever she wants to.
Based.
So why are you?
You know the response. The response is that baby didn't ask to be put in that situation, and it's not the issue of you have to give your kidney. It's they already have your kidney.
Okay, he's pro-life and supports borders. That's cool.
The majority of
plus.
libertarians who run in the LP are pro-choice, right? Or am I wrong?
I don't really work with the LP,
I
but
know
all
Jorgensen was.
the libertarians I work with, like
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
We're a little over an hour, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
well, about 95% of the libertarians.
Okay.
And, for helping the KGB lights.
Is anything else
Yeah,
interesting?
awful lot.
yeah,
No. Okay, I think that sums up the debate, guys. We got through it in 2 hours, 40 minutes. It's not bad. I thought the analysis was good. We made about the time. I was hoping for like 2 hours. We went a little over the estimated time I wanted to get through it, but we did get through the whole thing. So that was an accomplishment. Okay. Well, I'll end the stream in like 20 minutes. So we can have 20 minutes of Q&A and fun and whatever else I can figure out. Anyways, I will say this before I forget. What was I going to say? I just forgot it. It's getting late. So, I was thinking, so, like I said, the schedule is going to be every Friday night. Hopefully, we'll see if that changes. Hopefully every Friday night, I want to do like a weekly show, like an actual like format, not really super like boomer tier, but just like a rather formatted, structured news show. And then every week I want to do like one bonus stream, right? I.e. this is a bonus stream because it's like a reaction stream to something or whatever. But one thing I do want to do with the bonus streams, I don't know. We'll test it out. We'll figure it out. I don't think it'll be public after. I'll probably go on like the members tab after, but we can do it live. Is something like gaming streams. Like I was thinking about this. I was like, what if we did like a New Vegas playthrough with the community? Like, wouldn't that be fun? Like, wouldn't that actually be cool? And the reason I say New Vegas is because I feel like we can actually provide actual commentary on the factions and the political ramifications of each faction and all that. And I can, explain my take of why I'm like a Mr. House nationalist or whatever in that game. I feel like it'd be fun. But in order to do that, here's the issue. Okay, in order to do that, I could buy like a capture card and hook it up to the Xbox or whatever. I don't know if that's going to work. I don't know if that'll stream well. Like I have like a MacBook laptop. I would have to use OBS. I still don't know if my MacBook can even handle like streaming that. So I feel like the solution is I need to get a PC. The question is, I don't know how PCs work. I'm not a PC guy. I'm a total Mac guy. So I'm kind of asking the chat for a PC gamer guys in chat. If I wanted to get a decent, not super expensive, but like a decent PC that can play a last gen or whatever console game like New Vegas that can play that and then stream it on OBS to YouTube at the same time with very clean quality and not lagging or whatever, what would I have to get? And like, what kind of budget are we looking at so I can kind of estimate that? If you guys could help out on that front, because I'll be honest, I don't really know. Graphics card says gamer. Real. We love graphics card. Graphics card's probably more of a gamer than me, but so true. Who do you think are good starter conservatives for newcomers? Tucker Carlson, Michael Knowles. In terms of like red pilling entry level people, I don't know. Crowder's okay. I don't know. Right, Knowles and Walsh, real. Enclave nationalism. That's just you just say that because they have cool aesthetics. I don't find the Enclave based. They're just like genocidal maniacs, like unironically. Okay. I think the same thing of like the Legion to a lesser extent, but I like the Legion. It's very interesting how like, it's very interesting. I feel like part of the reason why I'm a Mr. House supporter in New Vegas because I feel like I relate to him. I feel like we relate to him. You have the NCR on one side who are just basically like the establishment, the uniparty, the neocon, neoliberal, the consensus or whatever. And they have their issues with the shortcomings of democracy and corruption and all that other stuff. And they're on the left side of the world, the West. In the East, on the right, you have Caesar, who, ascribes to be based. And on the surface, he seems like it is. But when you break it down, number one, he's a LARPer. And number two, he doesn't know how to build things, right? He really is just the edgy right-wing e-lord or whatever. I mean, he really is. The comparisons are striking. Army of very loyal followers and stuff. But his philosophy itself is just flawed. It seeks to just be brutal and edgy for the sake of it, for just the sake of it. You know what I mean? They feel the need to crucify people and enslave all their women, just I don't know, for the sake of sheer brutality. But then it's also like they don't know how to build things. They really don't. What has the Legion built? They build nothing. They're literally a bunch of glorified raiders. They're a glorified subset of almost like the uncivilized tribes and raiders that they claim to be against, because and Caesar's like, Vegas will be my Rome, but the Romans built Rome. Okay, they didn't take Rome from someone else and then claim it as Rome, right? But that's the problem with the Legion. Is just a glorified raiding party, a glorified bunch of warlords, because they don't know how to build. They can't build civilization. They have no knowledge of it. They have no appreciation for it. So despite their like outward showing of hierarchy and order and traditionalism and Pax Romana and all that, behind the core, behind the veil, they're a bunch of raiders and LARPing as Romans and playing dress up. They don't know how to build things. They couldn't build things, And look at the people destined to take over the Legion. Like the legate, he has no appreciation for civilization at all. He just likes to destroy. Volpes and Colta, he's not the person supposed to take it over, but even him, like, he wouldn't know what he's doing. And then in the middle, you have Mr. House. Okay, and Mr. House, it fittingly is in the middle of the two, because he truly is. You see how that works? It's very interesting. Mr. House is the only guy who actually cares about Vegas, who preserved Vegas for 200 years, who protected Vegas. Vegas is his actual home. He's not a foreign invader just trying to like take it for economic imperialism or whatever. He loves Vegas. He loves the place, and he built it. He built New Vegas. Okay, New Vegas is an impressive, clean, high functioning civilization because of Mr. House. Mr. House built it. He knows how to build civilization. He's arguably the best civilization builder in the whole wasteland. Okay, so there's him. And then the other thing is like, I think he has the perfect system. He even says it. He's like, I don't have no grandeur. Democracy failed. Democracy sucks. Look out the windows. Based Mr. House take. And then he has the other take of, I don't need any delusions of grandeur. I'm just an autocrat. And autocracy, he literally says in the game, like, autocracy is good when you have someone as smart as me in charge and I can just make all decisions unimpeded that are the correct decisions. And it's like, so true. So true. So, Mr. House is objectively the correct faction in New Vegas. Okay. This is real. This is real. NCR is too democratic and too bureaucratic. They're too liberal. And Caesar is a LARPing personality cult of raiders. Mr. House, though, I don't like the technocracy. I don't think there's a perfect faction. Okay, don't get me wrong. I think there are a lot of problems with New Vegas or whatever. But still, if you give me a choice, between the three major factions, everyone thinks independent Vegas is stupid, so I don't even need to entertain that. Objectively, Mr. House knows what he's doing. All right. The main issue with Mr. House is he kind of believes in the outcome justifies the means. Well, I think every faction believes that. Every faction in the game believes that. I don't think there's a faction in the game that doesn't. Like, look at the NCR. I mean, they're imperialistic. They frankly, they claim they don't, but they actually do things against the will of people a lot of times. I mean, I think every faction believes that they want their will to be done. I mean, that's really about it. The NCR wants to kill House for what reason? Literally no reason. They have no other justification than like, oh, we think he's in the way or whatever, So it's just like, now the best faction is the boomers. Well, I'm talking about factions you can side with. Not like side factions, okay? The Legion are basically a Mongol style horde. No, it's so true. It's so true. Like they missed, I think, the best and most important thing about Rome, which is the actual civilization and the art that they built. The Legion has no art. They have no glory. They have no literature. They're just like a godless, psychotic band of raiders, much like the Mongols. And they have to take. They can't build anything. They have to take things. Okay. So it's true. It's true. Mr. House, the correct faction, and it's very funny because I think the comparisons of New Vegas to you could say the internet right are on this take is very symbolic as well. So it's real. We are New Vegas, the only people who care about New Vegas and aren't on some crusade for something. It's just so true. To the left of us, you have the establishment, you have the globalists, the Democratic Uniparty. To the right, you have idiotic and insane LARPers. And in the middle, you have us. It's so true. It's so true. So, you going to the 21 convention this October? Both Jeff Younger and Andrew Tate will be present, and speaking rumor has it. What's the 21 convention? I don't even know what that is. I've never heard of that. 21 convention. Well, it's in Orlando, so I could go. What is this, though? 2.8 stars. Impressive. Sounds like a great time. Oh, it's like a masculinity event or whatever. It's like a men's conference. Let me see. How much is it? How much is it? How much is a ticket? Standard ticket. $1,700? What the heck do I look like to you, KGB show? That is a scam. That is a scam. $1,700 to listen to this guy tell me about how to be a man, bro. Yeah, unbelievable. Unbelievable. My goodness. Yeah, I only pay $1,700 to listen to some like masculinity speeches. Make men alpha again. This is like Jack Murphy reminiscent. This guy is scamming people for money and they think they're going to leave being an alpha male. What a scam. What an absolute scam. Is KGB show going to go? KGB, are you guys paying $1,700 for this? What a terrible! What? No wonder it had 2.8 stars. Real. What a ripoff! What an insane ripoff! Oh my gosh! How much is the live stream ticket now? I'm curious about that. How much do you have to pay to watch the live stream? $400. You have to pay $400 to listen to watch a live stream of the speeches. Who is paying for this? Okay, this is sad, actually. It is sad that like men feel like so desperate to become masculine that they fall for these scams. Like that's sad. That's actually pathetic. Okay? Like who's going to pay $400 for this? To listen to some dude who looks like Jack Murphy tell him about, I don't know, killing animals with his bow and arrow in the woods? Like what are they gonna teach you? It looks like it's just speeches too. Like what do you get out of this? Let's see. So for the $1,700 ticket, you get to bring a friend for free. Oh wow, dude. 1-year pass to 21 University. I don't know what that is. Early access, entrance to the meet and greet. Oh, you get to meet them. Oh, wow. Meet them. Shake hands with your favorite speeches. Oh, gosh, guys. You know I'm paying $1,700 to shake Andrew Tate's hand. Oh, my gosh. This is insane. Do you think I can afford this with the like $20 in super chats we made? Like, this is not smart economics. Okay. How much is the super ticket? So the extra things are the super tickets. Attend speeches from both. Okay, so you get that. You get live stream access. Oh wow, you get to rewatch your favorite speech from whatever. You get a VIP dinner. Okay, so they pay for your hotel. Okay, well that's good. Front row, no one cares, and you get open bar access at special events. Well, let's see how much this is. Wow, $2,700, $26.99. This is OnlyFans for No, it's so true. It's so true. It's so real. Oh my gosh. Wow. This is a joke. The hotel, it's so true. They're going to put you up at like the they're going to put you out with like the hotel Motel 6, maybe Courtyard Marriott if you get lucky. Not the regular Marriott, the Courtyard Marriott. Okay, got that? It's so true. This is insane. To shake hands. Wow. Yeah, I'm paying for. We're definitely going to this thing, boys. Anyone who pays for this ticket is an idiot. I don't care. Okay. The fact that like you fall for this proves that like you're not actually masculine. Okay. The people who attend this are arguably the biggest betas and simps on the planet. Okay. Because if you're so desperate that you pay $1,700 to meet, I don't know, Andrew Tate or whoever's speaking at this thing, like you're the simp, you're the beta, and you're actually making it worse by paying for this ridiculousness. So it's so true. Okay. Oh, my bad. Every American virtue event, including APU events, have not been more expensive for general admission than $30 or $35, I believe. Okay. So I would suggest all save their money and check out the very epic event we may have coming later this year, either in Georgia or Arizona. I will not say anything more, but seems a lot more cash benefit than this crap, like unironically. So, internet is it's so true. It's so true. Watch the dinner be McDonald's. Guys, McDonald's is alpha. Don't you know that? So, all right, guys. Well, we will end the stream here. I will see you guys. I'll see you guys Friday for the show, obviously. Might have some videos out this week. I'll definitely have some videos out this week. I want to do like a Dr. Oz video and whatnot. But until then, guys, I'm going to wrap the stream. Be sure to leave a like before you leave. Have a blessed night, everyone. Have a good rest of your week if I don't see you again in chat or whatever. And until then, folks, thank you very much for watching. Alpha Moves Only. Have a good night and peace.
In leaving it, I do so with this prayer. May God's grace be with you in all the days ahead.
And it's easy to be discouraged right now, but it won't defeat God's church. Be encouraged. There are thousands of prophets who have not bowed the knee to Baal. And be encouraged. At the end of the day, the bride of Christ will be defended. She will be protected. She will be preserved. And she will be restored, redeemed, and rescued by her Savior. Amen.
Okay, one last thing I wanted to say. All right, I just thought about this. So, for like a semester, or I believe a year, I'm not even sure, in your average college university fraternity, it's like $1,500 to $2,000. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that fraternities are the bastion of Christian conservatism, but I'd arguably say that the experience of being in a fraternity and the experience from like this conference will probably get you about the same degree of like masculine education or whatever. And the cost value there, it's like if you're in a fraternity, you get like a whole year worth of like benefits and stuff and social environment, as opposed to attending this conference for a few days that is the same price. It's just idiotic. It doesn't make any sense. Okay. But yeah, anyways, guys, just wanted to point that out. That's ridiculous. Okay, now good night for real, guys.